Hey guys, tonight we're taking you somewhere dry, hot, and surprisingly chill, ancient Egypt. You're about to stroll through sun-scorched alleyways, dip into courtyard pools, and maybe sweat just a little less while learning how the ancients beat the heat without a single ceiling fan in sight. Picture this, it's the 32nd century BCE and you're stepping into your small mud brick house just as the sun starts its merciless climb overhead. The streets are already glowing like baked clay plates, and the air shimmers with heat waves that make even the cats too lazy to hiss. You won't survive this day in wool or walls made of anything modern. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening in a heat wave of your own, drop your location and local time down below. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip inside the cool shadow of a typical Egyptian house, and instantly, the outside heat feels like a fading memory. The reason? Mud brick? Humble, unglamorous, wildly effective. These bricks, made from Nile silt, sand, and straw, were sun-dried into thick blocks that kept out heat like a dream. Not a single breeze inside, and yet it's cool, still kind of solid, like the house itself is exhaling. Shade. You reach out, trail your fingertips along the inner wall. It's slightly rough but dry and surprisingly cold to the touch, even after hours under the harshest sun on Earth. That's thermal mass, though ancient Egyptians didn't call it that. Thick walls absorbed daytime heat slowly and released it gradually overnight, so interior temperatures stayed relatively stable, a kind of ancient passive cooling. Most houses had small or no windows facing the sun. Instead, you might notice a little opening high up, letting in filtered light and just enough air without turning the house into an oven. Windows, optional. Courtyards, mandatory. You walk barefoot through an open central courtyard, light dappling through palm leaves. A few chickens strut by. There's a shallow basin of water to one side. Someone's left a jug in the corner, no doubt for cooling, not just storage. You hear a neighbor murmur a joke about not burning your foot soles today, and you chuckle. The heat was always a punchline in this land, but the joke's on it. They found ways around it. The courtyard isn't just for hanging laundry or gossiping about which priest keeps passing out in the midday ceremonies. It's your home's lungs. During the day, it collects what little breeze exists. At night, it becomes the prime sleeping spot, mattresses laid out under the open sky, away from the cramped bedrooms that heat up like ovens. And yes, everyone, from potter to priest, knew to plan their day around the shade. Work before sunrise. Rest at peak sun. Talk again at dusk. The heat dictated life like a pharaoh, absolute, fiery, and not to be ignored. Walk a little deeper into this imaginary neighborhood. You notice that most homes are just 1 or 2 stories tall. Why? Because vertical climbing in 115-degree weather isn't fun, even if you're ancient and allegedly tough, but also flat rooftops made for prime nighttime cooling real estate. And we'll get to that later. In the wealthier quarters, homes were even more advanced. Some had multiple courtyards, garden spaces with irrigation, and whitewashed walls, bright surfaces to reflect sunlight instead of absorbing it. It's not just pretty, it's practical. Historians still argue whether these decorative flourishes were more status-driven or thermally strategic. Honestly, why not both? In fact, many early Egyptian homes were built facing north to avoid direct sun penetration. The design logic was astonishingly ahead of its time. Compact layouts, shaded alleys, and walls angled to block the late afternoon blaze. You know, like they had an instinct for comfort thousands of years before air conditioning was a thing. You pause beside a doorway draped in linen. It flutters slightly in the shade, doing just enough to suggest that yes, air does exist, even if only barely. A family sits inside, gathered around a low table. The elder slowly pours water from a jar, its outer surface damp with condensation. The youngest child lounges in the corner on a reed mat, idly fanning himself with a piece of papyrus. No one seems rushed, no one's complaining. They've mastered the art of slowing down with the sun. That's another unspoken technique the ancients perfected. Timing. Beat the heat not by conquering it, but by outlasting it. Want to work the field? Do it before Ra, the sun god, finishes breakfast. Want to bake bread? Start before the oven outside turns your house into one. Want to sleep? You'll need the breeze and a few tricks for later. You hear a vendor shuffle by with a basket of lotus flowers, sweat glistening down his temples. He pauses under a fig tree just outside. That fig tree isn't ornamental, it's essential, a giver of shade and fruit and a gathering place where even gossip melts a bit slower. Later you'll find out that even the construction methods followed this logic. Builders often worked at night or before sunrise, using the coolness to stretch effort further. And the bricks? They had to be rotated and sun-dried evenly to avoid cracking. Yet another dance with heat, always on Egypt's terms. But for now you linger in this shaded calm, grateful for walls that breathe, courtyards that cool, and a civilization that learned to live with the sun instead of fighting it. You start to feel sleepy just listening to the rhythm of this slower, smarter, heat-beating way of life. And don't worry, you'll get to try their rooftop naps, beer tricks, and even their weirder methods. Yes, there's dung involved, soon enough. But for now, rest in the dim quiet, the first of many cool secrets still waiting to be unwrapped like a linen shroud. You step back into the dusty courtyard, where a breeze, yes, an actual breeze, slides across your shoulders. Not a gust, not a gale, but a soft exhale from the desert itself. And yet, somehow, it's enough. You glance up, curious, where's it coming from? Your gaze settles on the wooden latticework peeking out from a neighbor's upper-story window. Intricate, honeycomb-like panels cover the opening, carved with both beauty and purpose. That's mashrabia, or at least an ancient ancestor of it. Call it the great-great-grandparent of your window blinds and air grills. You duck beneath one to take a closer look, the shade dappling your face like cool ink across skin. These wooden screens were more than ornamental, engineered to direct wind into rooms and filter out sunlight with uncanny efficiency. Air passed through the holes and slats, accelerated by pressure differences, and entered the room not as a blast, but as a whisper. You tilt your head slightly. It really is cooler here. Just a few degrees, but enough that your skin notices. Enough that your shoulders relax. And the funny thing? The air actually smells better. These grills didn't just move air, they often hung over water jars or moist cloth to add humidity to the dry breeze. Basically, someone invented the swamp cooler 4,000 years before it hit Home Depot. And unlike modern vents that rattle or hum like a tired raccoon, these made no noise. They were carved silence, directing air like a priest directs incense, peaceful, humble, and surprisingly clever. Now, some of these lattice patterns were so ornate they told stories, fish, lotuses, even tiny gods peeking through. Scholars still debate whether the patterns were purely symbolic or had thermodynamic purpose. But hey, when a piece of wood keeps you cool and makes you look mysterious, that's a win. Step into the adjacent room, past the mashrabia. It's dim but not dark, like the inside of a fig. The breeze travels across the ceiling, grazing it like fingers on a drumhead. That was intentional too. Ancient Egyptians knew to raise ceilings high and angle them to help hot air rise up and away. You might not see a fan, but air is moving, and it's moving for you. In richer homes, those belonging to priests, scribes, or merchants with more sandals than sense, mashrabia-like systems were sometimes paired with hanging cloth soaked in scented water. Imagine frankincense-laced wind brushing against your cheek while you nap on a reed mat. Imagine not getting cranky about it. That's climate luxury, Egyptian style. You slip back outside and glance around the neighborhood. The mashrabia are nearly everywhere, like a secret language in wood. Some are built into upper walls to catch higher, cooler air. Others are at street level, shaded by vines and fig branches. Then comes the really fun part, eavesdropping, not on people, on the wind itself. You begin to recognize patterns. One alley hums more than others. One corner of the courtyard always gets that breath of air just after noon. Locals knew this, mapped it with their skin, and used it to build smarter. Your house may face north to dodge the sun, but your mashrabiyah? It faces the wind, always. You trail a finger along the edge of one wooden panel. The surface is smooth from years of touch, mothers peeking through it, children tracing it absent-mindedly during long prayers. And of course, you, a traveller from a future full of thermostats, marvelling at the genius of passive cooling. A kid nearby tosses a small bundle of papyrus strips into the air, watching them float through the lattice gaps and swirl into the alley. You smile. He's not just playing, he's watching the breeze, testing its strength, measuring, in his own quiet way, the temperature of the day. And in that moment, you realize the desert wasn't just something to survive. It was something they understood, watched, studied. They didn't force it to change, they danced with it. And mashrabiyah was part of that dance. Imagine trying that today. No AC, just careful architecture, mindful placement, and the knowledge that heat can be redirected, softened, coaxed away rather than conquered. Of course, you also imagine trying to explain mashrabiyah to your landlord and getting an email back saying, please stop carving holes in your walls. Still, the elegance sticks with you. This wasn't tech, it was wisdom. Something quiet and useful and built to last for centuries, not seasons. A functional kind of beauty that whispered through the walls of a world long gone but never really forgotten. Back inside, you rest beneath a mashrabiyah opening and let your thoughts drift. You imagine a scribe writing by its filtered light, a priest cooling off between chants, a grandmother placing a jar beneath it to chill before a feast. The sun begins its descent, casting long golden beams through the latticework, breaking into 100 sleepy shapes across the floor. One looks like a falcon, one like a fish, one just dances with dust motes glimmering softly in the quiet room. You breathe in, air moves, faint but steady, your skin is cool enough. Your mind is slower now, sleepier. Somewhere nearby, a cat yawns from a stone ledge, stretches once, and does the only smart thing in this heat, absolutely nothing. The mashrabiyah creaks once in the evening breeze, a small wooden sigh in a city built on sand, silence, and survival. Your feet pad across the courtyard again, but this time you're not focused on the breeze. You glance down, the ground beneath you is smoother, cooler, more deliberate. It's not just packed dirt or ordinary stone, it's polished, gleaming slightly even in low light, with a faint echo as your heel lifts and falls. You've just stepped into one of ancient Egypt's cleverest forms of low-tech temperature control, the cool stone floor. Not every home had the luxury, of course, but for those who could manage it, or who lived close to a temple or wealthy patron's estate, the choice of flooring was more than aesthetic. It was thermal strategy in action. Walk barefoot across a slab of alabaster at noon, and you'll understand immediately. The earth remembers the night, and stone holds on to that memory. The Egyptians knew this. They understood material as medicine. Limestone, alabaster, basalt. They weren't just chosen for shine or symbolism. They were chosen because they stayed cool long after the sun had tried its best to warm them. You find yourself stepping more slowly now, enjoying the contrast against your skin, like dipping your toes into the edge of a spring without needing to leave the room. The deeper into the building you go, the more refined the flooring becomes. Some rooms have flagstones so flat and tightly fitted that you'd swear they were cut by machine. And yet, all hand-chiseled, all laid in place by people who had probably never heard the phrase heat fatigue, but sure knew how to fight it. You reach what must be the central gathering space, a room for eating, talking, maybe even sleeping on particularly brutal nights. The floors here are darker, smoother, and absolutely cool. You kneel, press your palm flat. There's no moisture, no draft, and yet it's comfortably chilly. You could nap here, no question. This wasn't accidental. Egyptian builders often selected darker stone for shaded interiors, material that retained coolness while resisting the outer day's blaze. In grander structures like temples or elite villas, you'd even find mosaic-style floors, small stone tiles arranged in geometric patterns. And while some might have thought it was purely decorative, modern heat analysis suggests otherwise. The more seams, the more interruption in radiant heat transfer. Basically, pretty and practical. You scoot over a few feet, there's a sunbeam cutting across the room, lighting up part of the floor. You stretch your hand into it, instant warmth. Pull it back to cool. It's like the building is offering a choice, bask or escape. And oh, the tricks they had. Some households scattered wet reeds or damp cloths across the floors at night. Not to mop, though that might have helped, but to encourage evaporative cooling. The stone absorbed that moisture, just a little, then let it out slowly as the sun rose. You wouldn't exactly call it spa-like, but for ancient Egypt, that was luxury living. Historians still argue whether certain stone types were chosen specifically for this cooling effect, or simply because they were available and pretty. The truth is probably both. When a civilization lasts 3 millennia, you pick up a few tricks. And who says function and fashion can't wear the same linen tunic? You wander toward the corner of the room, where a low platform is raised a few inches above the floor. On it, someone's sleeping, or rather napping like a professional. Just a linen wrap, a stone pillow and a breeze brushing across the smooth ground. No tossing, no turning, just deep, cooling rest. You can imagine it now, the family gathering at night, lying directly on these polished surfaces, feet stretched toward the open doorway. Maybe a cousin mumbles a bedtime tale about crocodiles that could talk. Maybe someone giggles, but no one's hot, not like outside. Even temples used this logic. Ever walked barefoot through Karnak or Luxor? The heat blasts your face, but the floor, chilly, welcoming, sacred chill. The priests may have claimed divine intent, but let's be honest. Somewhere in those thick stone slabs was a very human desire not to faint mid-prayer. You turn to leave the room and almost trip over a pet monkey, someone's companion who's curled up next to a spot of cool stone. He opens one eye, gives you a sleepy glare, then promptly returns to napping. The monkey gets it. Later, you'll hear stories of nobles who demanded their floors be relaid with imported stone from the Sinai, or polished marble from Mediterranean traders, not for status, but for that rare, lasting, nighttime cool. You might laugh, but you also might do the same. Who wouldn't want to live on cold marble when your walls are baking at 110 degrees? You lie down for a moment, just to test it. Your shoulder blades kiss the floor. It doesn't feel like rock, it feels like the absence of heat, the echo of midnight, a silent partner in your battle against the sun. And if you listen carefully, past the distant hum of wind through mashrabia, past the rustle of linen drapes, you can almost hear the floor itself sigh, a long, stone-cold breath that says, yes, you can rest here. You sit up slowly from the stone floor, spine cooled, hair slightly damp from the temperature difference. And there it is, sitting innocently in the corner, dark clay, round belly, narrow neck, the zir, or cooling jar. It looks simple enough. You've probably seen something similar in antique shops or Instagram kitchens sold as artisanal water storage. But here in ancient Egypt, it was high-tech hydration. You walk over and rest your hand on it. The surface is rough and cool, cooler than the surrounding air. Your fingers come away slightly damp. That's the secret right there, sweating. Not you, well you too, but the jar. These water vessels, often made of porous earthenware, slowly released tiny amounts of moisture through their walls. As the water evaporated, it carried away heat from the surface. Voila! Chilled water, no fridge required. Evaporative cooling, the most ancient of thermodynamics. And yet it feels like magic in your hands. You lift the jar slightly, it's heavier than it looks, and you can feel the cooler slosh of liquid inside. A servant nearby motions toward a shallow cup made of alabaster. You pour. The water glugs out in thick, sleepy waves, like it knows how to take its time. You sip. It's not ice cold, but after walking through desert air and stone courtyards, it might as well be glacial melt. Smooth, earthy, faintly mineral. If you've ever left a water bottle outside and prayed it didn't become soup, This is the opposite. This is ancient engineering doing you a small, silent favor. And these jars weren't just for storage. They were strategically placed on shaded verandas, in breezy corners, or next to mashrubia openings, anywhere the wind could encourage evaporation. You'd sometimes see them half buried in sand, the lower portion tucked into cool earth, or wrapped in wet cloth to accelerate the process. Not high maintenance, just clever. In markets, vendors stored them under linen canopies, rotating them through sun and shade, like chefs flipping steaks. Even children knew how to check the jar's temperature with their cheeks, not hands. Foreheads too hot? Hug the jar. Lost your temper? Go sit by one. It was the ancient Egyptian version of touch grass. What's more, these jars had names, personalities even. Kule for small ones, Zir for larger communal types. Some had little woven baskets built around them to make transport easier. Some were etched with symbols, ankhs for life, fish for abundance, or eyes to ward off thieves, because yes, cold water was worth stealing. Historians still argue whether certain shapes worked better for cooling, or whether the clay composition mattered more. Some believe the round-bellied form wasn't just aesthetically pleasing, it maximized the surface area to volume ratio, allowing for more evaporation. Others insist that size didn't matter. What mattered was air movement and shade. And as you cradle your alabaster cup again, you realize, whatever the truth, it worked. There's a story scribbled on a tomb wall not far from here. A man is shown drinking from a jar while his oxen rest nearby, and the caption boasts something along the lines of he was never parched. Not he was rich, or he was brave. Just that he stayed hydrated. Honestly, relatable. You settle back on a small reed stool near the jar and watch the sunlight sneak across the floor like a thief. The jar stays in the shadow, intentionally. Because even the laziest servant knew that direct sun meant warm water, and warm water meant complaints. Possibly from you. In temple complexes, massive storage jars were sometimes sunken into the ground, where priests would dip in ladles before long ceremonies. Cold water before praise. Cold water before processions. A sacred drink before sacred duties. The Nile gave life, but these jars gave relief. And for those constantly on the move, traders, messengers, donkey drivers, smaller corked jars were slung over shoulders or hung from carts, swinging slightly, catching wind. The swinging itself sped up evaporation. You imagine jogging behind a cart just to feel the breeze off one. You probably wouldn't be alone. Some elite households even perfumed their water jars, adding crushed mint, lotus, or citrus rinds to improve the scent and taste. Ancient Egyptian spa water, basically. Cool, fragrant, probably served with a side of gossip and figs. You lift the jar's lid one more time. A faint mist escapes, quickly vanishing into dry air. But for that one moment, your face feels kissed by something kind. Ancient, yes, but kind. The servant returns, collecting your cup with a nod. He replaces the lid, wraps a thin cloth around the neck, and gently pours a trickle onto the base, resetting the system, giving the jar another breath. You watch as it starts again, beads of water forming, sliding, disappearing into heat. This wasn't just a trick of pottery, it was a philosophy. Don't fight the sun, work around it, persuade it. Cool your water by letting it escape just enough to save you. Every drop counts, but even more so when every degree matters. You stretch, feeling a yawn rise in your chest. Your belly is cool now, your throat soothed. The jar hums a silent thank you. And somewhere far off, in the shadows of another mud-brick home, someone else is lifting their own cup, their own cooling jar beside them, savouring the same old miracle. Water, cooler than the air, thanks to a little clay, a little breeze, and a very old trick that still works just fine. You rise from the reed stool, a little groggy from that chill water, maybe a bit too relaxed, and just in time too, because someone gestures for you to follow them down a narrow passage. It's shaded, twisting, cooler with every step. The air here shifts subtly. The sound changes too, muffled, dense, like a temple whisper. You duck your head slightly as the ceiling lowers. There's a dry earth smell now and something else. Grain. Dusty, nutty, ancient. You're descending into the heart of a home or storehouse, where temperature truly mattered, the underground granary. In ancient Egypt, food was power, and power needed preservation. With the Nile's floods predictable but not guaranteed, everyone, from pharaoh to peasant, stored grain like it was gold. But if you've ever tried keeping bread in a hot pantry, you know the problem. Heat invites spoilage. That's where the Egyptians pulled a quiet masterstroke. You step into the granary. It's simple, carved from earth or stone, sunk beneath the home or set into the edge of a courtyard. The walls are thick, the air astonishingly cool. You breathe in, no mold, no rot, just grain. Millions of tiny husks stacked in silence. And it's not just food down here. Look closer. There are baskets of onions, dates, lentils, even jugs of oil and honey. In the wealthier quarters, you might find scrolls and fabrics too, things the heat would destroy. These underground cellars were like the ancient hard drives of daily life. Quiet, dry, essential. Now, the Egyptian builders didn't stop at just dig a hole and hope. No, they shaped the cellars carefully. Sloped floors to prevent pooling if any moisture crept in. Narrow doorways with stone seals. Some even lined their storage pits with fired bricks to block heat absorption. They understood insulation like a sleepy pharaoh understood naps. Very well, thank you. Historians still argue whether some granaries were cooled further using evaporative methods, placing wet jars or cloths nearby, or allowing nighttime air to vent the space. We don't know for sure, but what we do know is that bread from grain stored in these pits fed cities, fed armies, fed priests who chanted for 12 hours straight in hot stone temples. You crouch near one of the grain baskets. The woven reeds are stiff but fine, like the fingers of someone who's never dropped a single kernel. You run your hand through the top layer. It's dry, clean, cooler than your skin, not freezing, but gentle, like a shady hand on your forehead. Imagine you're a farmer. You've just brought in your harvest. The sun is blistering, and you've spent 3 days threshing, sorting, hauling. Finally, you lift that basket, walk it down here, and pour it into the seller's waiting belly. You don't hear applause, but you know the real celebration is this. The grain won't spoil. You and your family won't starve. You've made peace with time. A lizard skitters past your foot and disappears into a crack in the wall. Even the animals know this is where the cool lives. Sometimes entire communities shared granaries, large public pits sealed with clay caps labelled with officials' seals. It wasn't uncommon to hear a neighbour brag not about their oxen or wife, but about how deep and dry their grain hole was. A strange flex, sure, but in 100-degree shade, sensible. And don't forget taxes. The pharaoh didn't want your coin, he wanted your wheat. Temple scribes would descend into these storerooms with wax tablets and long frowns recording every sack. And if your grain was mouldy, hot, or mouse-nibbled, you paid anyway. It was cool or cruel, your choice. You wander deeper into this cool cavern, and the stillness feels almost sacred. No chanting, no music, just the quiet presence of preservation. The kind of silence you only find when something's been done right for a very long time. You spot an amphora half buried in one corner. You lift it gently, its sides are cold. You pop the seal and sniff. Dried fish, spiced dates, maybe fermented lentils. You're not sure, but it's definitely old and definitely cool. Later you'll hear about entire tombs that included mini granaries, because even in the afterlife, a person deserved good grain and cool storage. Imagine that, crossing into eternity and still having temperature-controlled snacks. Respect. You turn to leave and glance once more at the stone threshold, where someone etched a mark, a sun with a line through it, a symbol of shade, of protection, a quiet reminder that survival wasn't always about swords and ships, it was about keeping things from getting too warm. And as you climb the steps back toward the light, your skin already begins to register the difference. The sun above feels hotter, louder, hungrier, but you smile. You've been underground, you've touched the quiet. You've seen how coolness was more than comfort. It was wisdom. sealed in stone, and waiting patiently beneath the sand. You emerge into the light once more, and the air hits you like a curtain straight from a pottery kiln. The heat is back, bold and sticky, wrapping your shoulders with all the subtlety of a sunburned toddler. But before you start to melt, a shadow flickers beside you, then another. You look up. A broad palm leaf fan waves back and forth, slicing the air into gentle currents. Behind it stands a man, bare-chested, linen-kilted, face blank, with the practiced disinterest of someone whose entire job is waving. That's right. You've officially encountered the ancient Egyptian fan-bearer. Now, before you roll your eyes, let's be clear. This was no minor role. In fact, in many noble households, and especially around royalty, the fan-bearer wasn't just someone hired to keep the boss cool. He was trusted. He was visible. He was, in many cases, powerful. You'd see the title etched in tombs, fan-bearer, on the right of the king. That's not a nickname, that's a job title. You step closer to inspect the fan. It's huge, nearly the size of a small carpet, made from palm leaves, ostrich feathers, sometimes even papyrus reeds, and always fixed to long handles. Some were just practical, others were lavish, inlaid with ivory, gold, or lapis lazuli, because of course they were. If you're going to be fanned, you might as well make it a royal performance. The air movement is subtle but real. You stand under it for just a moment and already feel your body ease. Shoulders drop, jaw unclenches. You breathe differently. This isn't just about breeze, it's about rhythm. See, the motion of the fan wasn't a mindless flapping, it had cadence, a tempo. You can imagine the soft whoosh, whoosh sound filling temple halls, echoing off stone columns like a lullaby made of wind. Now let's be honest, this was a bit of a class divider. If you had your own human fan bearer, congratulations, you were definitely someone. The rest of Egypt? They used handheld fans, smaller, faster, often made from woven reeds or animal hair. Functional, effective, but lacking the drama of having someone else do the work for you while you looked gloriously unbothered. You pass a group of market-goers lounging beneath a reed awning, each fanning themselves lazily with little folded palm leaf fans. Children compete to make the biggest breeze, giggling every time they accidentally fan a passerby's skirt up. Classic. Nearby, an elderly woman fans herself with a fan shaped like a lotus blossom, muttering under her breath about how Ra has gotten cocky again. You give her a respectful nod. She's clearly a heat veteran. Back in the royal court, things get even more interesting. Fan-bearers weren't just there for cooling. They had ceremonial duties too. They flanked the pharaoh during processions, stood behind priests during important rituals, and were often considered part of the royal inner circle. It's like being a bodyguard, a stagehand, and a walking HVAC unit rolled into one linen-clad professional. Historians still argue whether some of these fans served religious purposes, representing divine wind perhaps, or invoking the breath of the gods. After all, breath was sacred in Egyptian mythology. The first breath of life came from Atum. The desert wind was seen as a force of chaos. So maybe, just maybe, your fan-bearer wasn't just cooling your neck. Maybe he was protecting your soul. And let's not forget the fan-bearers who made it into art. Tomb paintings often show them with fans held high, like giant exclamation points over a noble's head. There's even one depiction where a fan-bearer is leaning casually, half asleep, behind a reclining scribe. Same energy as a bored intern on a Zoom call. Glorious. But don't be fooled. These fans were effective. Ever tried standing in 108-degree sun while wearing layers of linen and gold jewelry? You'd beg for a fan too. And once the breeze started, you'd understand exactly why royalty insisted on it everywhere they went, from boat decks to banquet halls to desert shrines. And speaking of banquets, you follow your nose to one now. A shaded outdoor meal where attendants wave fans over tables, not just to cool guests, but to keep flies away. Multi-purpose cooling. You nod approvingly. You sit under a fig tree. Someone hands you a fan. You try it yourself. It's not easy. Your wrist tires quickly. You realize why fan-bearers were prized. This is actual work. The rhythm, the arm strength, the endurance in heat. It takes practice and patience and probably some very toned forearms. A boy next to you gives it a try, too enthusiastic, and hits you in the nose. You both laugh. The palm fronds rustle above, mimicking the motion, like nature saying, "Don't worry, I got this." Later, you'll learn that some fan handles were inscribed with poems, love notes, prayers, even insults. One surviving example reads, "May your breeze never blow crooked, sharp." You recline again and watch as the sunlight flutters through the feathers of a passing fan. A breeze stirs your hair. The air shifts. You almost forget the heat. And isn't that the point? Not to eliminate it, not to conquer it, just to soften it, to outlast it, to wave it away with style. And as the fan resumes its rhythm, you lean your head back, eyes half-lidded, and let it carry you to the edge of sleep. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The fan's rhythm fades behind you as you wander farther from the shaded courtyard, out past the alleyways that curl like sun-drenched snakes. The air is thick now, syrupy with heat. Even the flies are sluggish, but ahead something glints, light on water. You step closer, and there it is, a garden pool. You blink. It's almost too perfect. Surrounded by papyrus and blue lotus, the water lies still but not stagnant, dark, quiet, inviting. A breeze skates across its surface, carrying a hint of moisture that kisses your face. Relief arrives not in a gust, but in a sigh. This isn't just decoration. In a world ruled by heat, garden pools were a kind of rebellion. A place where air could be cooled by evaporation, where reflections doubled the sky, and where the elite didn't just survive the heat, they floated above it, literally. You kneel beside the edge. The stone rim is cool. Algae curls beneath the surface like a forgotten poem. You dip your fingers in. The water's not cold, but it's not warm either. It's the exact temperature of You glance around. This is no public bath. It's private, tucked into a noble home's garden, the sort of space meant for whispering, not shouting, designed to be quiet, to slow your thoughts as well as your body. Shade trees rustle above, acacia, sycamore, maybe a date palm if you're lucky, and a breeze tiptoes between them, nudged along by the pool's patient presence. Step into the sandals of an elite Egyptian. You've finished your morning rituals. You've passed through the stone-cool hallway. You've endured a few hours of temple business and tax talk. Now, it's time to undress, wrap yourself in linen, and wade slowly into your garden's quiet sanctuary. Not everyone swam, but nearly everyone soaked. Pools weren't Olympic-sized, more like big bathtubs, shallow enough to sit and sigh. A few guests might join you, or a servant might kneel nearby, dropping lotus petals into the water for fragrance, or pouring cool water down your shoulders from a porous jar. Historians still argue whether these pools were more ceremonial than recreational. Some were used for religious cleansing, others clearly were about indulgence. One noblewoman's tomb painting even shows her reclining on a raft of papyrus, while attendants splash her, gently, with long-handled scoops. Mood maximal. You notice something unusual. Fish. Tiny ones, maybe Nile tilapia or ornamental species. They weren't just decorative, they kept mosquito larvae under control. Nature's pool boy. Over the wall, you hear laughter. Children playing in another pool, smaller and less grand, but still cherished. You imagine a mother washing her baby there, singing softly while brushing a damp curl from the infant's forehead. Cooling, cleansing, calming, triple purpose. You stroll to the far side of the pool where a stone bench curves beneath a vine-draped trellis. You sit. The bench is shaded, and vines have grown thick and lush, absorbing some of the sun's ire. Beneath your feet, a small channel, an ancient irrigation path, trickles faintly. The pool isn't stagnant because it's part of a flow. The Egyptians were masters of controlled water, shadufs, canals, and clever grading that ensured water circulated without waste. And in this garden, that circulation meant continuous comfort. Water evaporated, air cooled, heat diffused. This wasn't just a break from the sun, it was a system, a plan. Even the colors help. Blue lotus, white lilies, green papyrus, they Calm the eyes, make the mind forget about the heat crawling up your spine. You feel your pulse slow, your shoulders loosen. You could fall asleep right here, next to this sleepy water. You notice a jar half submerged at the pool's edge. Someone placed it there intentionally, another passive cooling trick. Keep the jar in water, and what's inside will stay refreshingly mild. The wine in that jar isn't chilled, but it's miles better than heat-roasted vinegar. You reach down, pull the jar closer, and take a sip. Fruity, dusty, with a hint of clay. You exhale like someone in a sunscreen commercial, only you're wearing linen, and the only SPF is shade, please, forever. In richer estates, pools grew even grander. Some were shaped like a capital T, symbolizing life. Others were aligned with the stars or built near shrines, where priests performed ritual ablutions under moonlight. But for most it was simpler. Water, cool, to peace. Even animals got in on it. You watch as a sleek grey cat slinks toward the water, laps once, then steps neatly onto a lotus leaf for a mid-afternoon nap. It's a little dramatic. You respect that. In the distance, you hear the Nile, the ultimate pool, the source of life and the daily backdrop of survival. People bathed there, washed clothes, cooled livestock, even fished for dinner. But here in the garden, the pool isn't about utility, it's about serenity, a personal oasis carved from ritual and design. And just when you think this can't get more relaxing, someone walks by carrying a tray of cold beer in ceramic mugs. Yes, beer. Slightly sour, lightly chilled, from a well-placed cooling jar, and absolutely better than whatever you packed in your fridge last week. You sip, you sigh, you glance at the pool again. A dragonfly skims the surface like it knows it's starring in a daydream. And maybe you are too. Because even in a land where sun reigns supreme, the ancient Egyptians found a way to float through it, slow and cool and perfectly still. You dry your hands on a strip of linen and follow a narrow walkway away from the garden. The ground here is soft with dust, and each footstep makes the tiniest hush. You're headed toward the sleeping quarters, though calling them rooms might be a bit generous, more like nooks within the house, strategically placed to avoid the most brutal heat. You step inside and pause. It's dim, the walls close, but not suffocating. What strikes you immediately is the feel of the air. It doesn't slap you. It drapes. Soft, slow, almost indifferent. You spot folded cloth on a low reed mat, pale and clean. You kneel beside it and run your fingers along the weave. Linen. Of course it's linen. If ancient Egypt had a national fabric, this would be it. They wore it. They wrapped the dead in it. They even paid taxes with it. But here now, it's not about ceremony or status. It's about staying alive. Because when the mercury climbs and the air stands still, the wrong fabric turns your clothes into an oven mitt. But linen breathes. You pick up a folded tunic, coarse by modern standards, but surprisingly light. Woven from the flax plant, it was soft enough for comfort, but loose enough to let the air slip in. Egyptians didn't go for clingy fashion. They wore layers that moved with the breeze. You imagine yourself stepping outside in the early morning, linen fluttering faintly around your legs, the cool air chasing inside and swirling around your skin. And not a lot of it either. Egyptians dressed minimally. Most men wore simple kilts, knotted at the waist, and that was it. Women often wore straight-cut dresses with thin shoulder straps, no sleeves, no collars, nothing that trapped warmth. And kids, mostly naked until puberty, running around under the sun like tiny desert lizards. You stand before a polished copper mirror, more reddish than silver, slightly warped. You try on the linen, it's not tailored, it drapes. The heat touches it, then loses interest. Your arms feel exposed, your legs airy. You're not dressed to impress, you're dressed to survive. Even in the court of a pharaoh, fashion bent to temperature. Royalty might flaunt extra gold or jewelry, but the basic rule was still wear linen or melt. The finest linen, called woven air by modern historians, was practically translucent. So sheer, in fact, that one queen's gown still sparks scholarly debates over whether it counted as clothing or just extreme confidence. You wander through the room and spot a pile of cloth strips on the floor. They're head wraps, scarves, sashes used to shield skin, soak up sweat, even filter dust. You pick one up and hold it to your face. It smells faintly of oil and palm, comforting, earthy, and undeniably ancient. Near the back, hanging on a peg, you spot a long rectangular cloth. It's too big for wear. That's because it's a sleeping sheet, soaked in water and laid over the body at night. Evaporative cooling at its finest. You can practically feel the chill it would offer in the dark under a rooftop breeze. And here's the thing, they didn't just wear linen to stay cool. They wore white linen. Light colors reflect sunlight. You try on a darker tunic, one dyed with red ochre, and immediately feel the difference. It's subtle, but enough to matter. The white one practically shimmers in the sun, bouncing heat away like a snide remark. Historians still argue about the role of nudity in Egyptian society. Was it comfort, status, religious purity, practicality? Probably all of the above, but one thing's for sure. When your entire environment is a sun lamp, less is more. You step outside into the alley. The air hits you again, but now your body's better prepared. The linen breathes, the sandals give your feet a break, and your shoulders, bare to the air, feel the beginning of a breeze. You pass a woman hanging cloth to dry. She lifts it, flaps it once, and a gust of wind rushes through the alley. For a moment, it's enough to make you forget the temperature. The woman grins. "Linen's the only husband I need," she jokes. You laugh, but she's not wrong. Farther down, a boy tosses water onto the walkway and lies down on a damp cloth. Not to sleep, just to exist at a temperature that doesn't make him want to explode. A dog lies beside him, panting softly, tail twitching whenever the breeze shifts. You glance up at a rooftop where someone is spreading linen over a clay railing to catch wind. It billows like a sail. And you know if linen could talk, it would probably whisper, "Relax. I've got this." Back inside, you sit once more near the wall. The linen against your skin has warmed slightly, but it still breathes. It's not fighting you like polyester. It's working with you. A partner, not a prison. And in that sleepy, linen-wrapped stillness, you realize this wasn't just clothing, it was armor against the sun, against sweat, against suffocating discomfort. You lie back, pull the cloth gently over your eyes, and let the last of the daylight fade to soft, breathable darkness. The world softens behind that thin veil of linen pulled over your eyes. Light filters through gently. No harsh glare, just a glow. And in that comfortable half-darkness, something catches your ear. The faintest whisper of footsteps. Someone's climbing stairs. You lift the cloth and follow the sound. A narrow stone staircase spirals upward, hugging the inside of a wall that radiates fading heat. You climb slowly, footfalls quiet against smooth stone. As you reach the top, the sky opens above you, deep blue and scattered with the first stars of evening. You're standing on the rooftop, and it is blissfully, deliciously breezy. Here, above the heat-holding walls and sun-warmed streets, the air moves differently. Rooftop sleeping was one of ancient Egypt's most peaceful and practical ways to escape the relentless warmth of the day. When the walls trapped heat, when indoor air sat still and sticky, the only sensible thing to do was go up. You step onto the flat surface. It's simple, no handrails, no decor. Just open space and the sound of the wind skimming past your ears. Around you, other rooftops stretch into the distance, and on each one, beds, low wooden frames with slatted bases, mats, rolled linen blankets, stone headrests shaped like a gentle crescent. Nothing extravagant, but each bed positioned to catch whatever breeze the night might offer. You lower yourself onto one. The mat is firm, and the fabric smells faintly of sun and earth. The headrest, a curved piece of stone, surprisingly fits the nape of your neck. It's not fluffy, but it lifts your head just enough to let air circulate behind it. A design so minimal, it's basically prehistoric ergonomics. You lie back, and let the breeze settle over you. This is what the day has been leading toward, not a climax of action, but a surrender to stillness. The heat can keep huffing and puffing down below. Up here, you are beyond its reach, and you're not alone. On nearby rooftops, families murmur. Someone plucks at a lute, the tune drifting softly like smoke. A mother tells a bedtime story, something about a clever ibis bird and a sneaky crocodile. You catch the words papyrus scroll and stolen melon before the child's giggle fades into the night. The stars begin to sharpen. This far from city lamps and neon, the sky feels enormous, a canvas of light and breath, the kind of sky that stretches your thoughts just enough to make you forget you're in a desert. You feel the linen wrap across your chest, flutter slightly with each gust. You shift your leg. The mat underneath is still warm from the day, but the breeze lifts that warmth away bit by bit, like a gentle hand peeling off layers of tension. It's not just homes that embraced rooftop living. Even in temples and palaces, rooftops were used for nighttime escape. Priests meditated under stars, servants slept between shifts, and pharaohs, some even built rooftop shrines to the stars, whispering to distant gods while enjoying the best air in the palace. Historians still argue whether rooftop beds were used year-round or just in the hotter seasons. What we do know is that the architecture made it easy. Flat roofs with parapets, open staircases, minimal construction up top. Egyptians planned their homes vertically, not just for storage, but for sky. And during festivals or high holy days, rooftops transformed. Lanterns were lit, music floated upward, offerings were left in small bowls, dates, wine, a strip of perfumed cloth. The scent would rise into the air like a whispered prayer. You turn onto your side, a slight creak from the wooden frame. Somewhere nearby, a clay jug is being uncorked. Maybe someone's sipping cold beer or pouring a bit into a shallow dish to keep cool by evaporation. Either way, you smell something sweet, malted, faintly fruity. Earlier, as the sun set, families would have carried their bedding up here, rolled tightly like scrolls. They'd lay them out as twilight deepened, arranging them according to breeze direction, not feng shui. A successful night wasn't about dreams, it was about air circulation, and it wasn't always peaceful. Occasionally, rooftop life meant shooing away nosy cats or fending off a locust or two. You might wake up with a goose waddling across your mat. But those were small prices to pay for a full night of sleep away from suffocating walls. You shift again. The stars are brighter now, the breeze slightly stronger. A distant owl calls once, twice. You imagine a priest stirring from his rooftop mat across the city, mumbling thanks to Thoth, the ibis-headed god of knowledge, and, probably, of cool night air. A few rooftops away, someone snores loudly. You smile, ancient snoring, the original sound machine. You look up once more. The Big Dipper hangs above you, mirrored faintly in a shallow pool 2 homes away. The Nile glints in the distance, curled like a sleeping serpent under the stars. And above it all, the moon begins to rise, slow and full, casting silver across linen and sandstone. The heat has faded. Your skin no longer prickles, your breath slows, your limbs stretch across the mat, and the stone headrest now feels just right. You close your eyes, and the wind, cool, quiet, constant, slips into your dreams, where it becomes a whispering river, a pale bird, a fan made of stars. You sleep exactly where the ancients did, under the open sky, in the only place where summer couldn't follow. You wake slowly, not to an alarm or the glow of a screen, but to birds. They're not obnoxious about it, no aggressive chirping, just soft coos and distant flutterings, like someone's brushing the edge of the world with feathers. Your body feels lighter. Somehow that rooftop breeze massaged the stiffness from your bones. You stretch without fully rising, and your hand brushes the smooth, whitewashed wall next to your bedroll. It's faintly cool, even after a full day of sun the day before. You sit up and notice it. The walls around you glow with morning light, but they're not baking you alive. They're reflecting. Whitewashed. The ancient Egyptians knew a lot of things, but one of their quietest genius moves: painting their homes white. You trail your hand along the wall's plastered surface, lime and crushed shell, smoothed and brushed with pale pigment. Not just for beauty, not even mostly for beauty. Whitewashing was tactical. It deflected sunlight. In a land where the sun acted more like an interrogator than a celestial object, this mattered. Every bit of reflected heat was a bit of survival. Your home didn't need to absorb the blaze. It could bounce it right back at Ra with a sassy, glowing shrug. And it wasn't just homes, temples, government buildings, even simple granaries. If it had a wall, chances were good someone had lime-washed it, either freshly or with layer upon layer of effort from years past. Each coat not only refreshed the look, but strengthened its solar defense, like SPF, but for architecture. You peer over the edge of the roof, looking down the alleyway below. The entire neighborhood looks like it was dipped in pearl. Blinding at midday, but in the morning light, it's soothing, like walking through moonlight that forgot to go home. Now, walk with me. You step down the stairs, palm brushing the wall again, and pass through a narrow corridor painted white, not just on the outside, but within. The sunlight filtering through the high window doesn't get swallowed, it dances. It skitters across the floor like golden mercury, broken and redirected. Someone nearby is scrubbing a fresh coat onto their outer wall. Their hand moves in wide arcs, brushing the mixture in smooth spirals. They glance up, smile and say, "The brighter the wall, the cooler the belly." You don't question it. You turn into a small courtyard where a reflective copper basin sits in the corner. Another little trick. Place something shiny near a source of light, and it'll bounce warmth away. Egyptians knew how to work with nature's palette, not just its colors, but its light. Some wealthier homes took this even further. They inlaid their walls or floors with reflective materials, crushed quartz, mica dust, even polished shells. When sunlight hit just right, the entire space shimmered, not in a disco ball way, but in a "you're blessed to stand here" kind of way. Historians still argue whether some of these inlays were spiritual, meant to reflect the light of the gods, or simply practical, reflecting heat, guiding air. Maybe both, probably both. When your climate is relentless, even your religion starts thinking about airflow. You wander into a temple compound, and there it is again, those high, gleaming walls. But here there's more, columns painted white and carved with lines designed to catch wind. Even statues were sometimes positioned with heat in mind, facing away from the sun or placed beside reflecting pools that caught both light and cool air. You sit beside one such pool now, the white stone around it dazzling in the late morning sun. You blink once, then twice. Everything around you glows, but not in a burning way. In a way that says, you can stay here, it's not too much. Nearby, someone has placed a jug of beer atop a polished slab of limestone. Smart. The stone is angled, catching breeze and bouncing heat away. The jug sweats just slightly. You reach for it and take a sip. It's not cold, but it's not warm either. Perfect. You return to your courtyard. The fig tree casts a soft, leafy shadow across one side. You watch as the light hits the wall and doesn't enter. It stops, it gives up, because white says no. And isn't that the trick? Not fighting the sun with brute force, but politely refusing to let it win. A quiet boundary. A reflective, "No, thank you." You rest your back against the whitewashed wall again, eyes closing. The breeze is faint now, but you don't need much. The brightness around you isn't oppressive, it's protective, and as your mind drifts, you realize something small and lovely. The ancient Egyptians didn't just live in heat. They curated their place within it. They shaded, they fanned, they floated. And when all else failed, they painted everything white and dared the sun to argue. You wake again, not with a jolt, but with a stretch, a slow reconnection to your limbs under soft morning light. You're back in the courtyard now, and it's just after dawn. The sun is still friendly at this hour, like a lion that hasn't remembered it's supposed to hunt. But give it time. So, before that sun remembers its job description, you head toward the edge of the courtyard, where tall fig trees rustle quietly and something flutters overhead. Papyrus awnings. They don't look like much, just bundles of tightly woven reeds stretched across poles, tied down at corners, sagging slightly in the middle from the weight of early morning dew. But they're a miracle, a thin, gentle, rustling miracle. You sit beneath one, and the difference is immediate. The light still filters through, but the sun's bite is gone. It's as though the heat paused politely outside the barrier and decided to take the long way round. These awnings are made from papyrus reeds. Yes, the same plant Egyptians turned into scrolls. Talk about multitasking. The outer fibers, stripped and braided, are shockingly good at breaking up light while allowing air to pass through. The result? Shade that breathes. You could sit under it for hours and barely sweat. A servant nearby is adjusting one of the awnings. She loosens the tension at one corner and lets it flap softly in the rising wind. It moves like a curtain in a dream. Slow, quiet, just enough to whisper, "Not today. Heat. Not today." Above you, the canopy stretches across a wooden frame, supported by narrow beams driven into the wall. It casts a dappled shadow on the stone floor, broken into hundreds of dancing lines, shifting all day, never quite the same. If you squint, it looks like the surface of the Nile. Historians still argue whether papyrus was the optimal choice for awnings or just the most available. It was abundant, yes, but also incredibly sturdy and flexible. Woven tightly, it could last seasons, maybe even years. And when the sun finally wore it thin, well, just harvest some more. Papyrus grows like gossip. You lean back and watch the interplay of light and motion. The reeds rustle faintly in the wind, creating a kind of natural white noise. It's soothing, almost musical. You think this must be what temples sound like at rest. And yes, temples had their own awnings too, vast ceremonial tents made from layers of linen and reed, strung up over sacred courtyards where rituals played out under filtered light. Even the gods, it seems, appreciated a little shade. In wealthier homes, the awnings became art. Painted linen was sometimes added, pale blue to mimic sky, green to echo papyrus fields. One noble's villa even had embroidered shades with depictions of lotus blossoms and birds. Imagine lying back, looking up, and seeing not just sky, but stitched stories. You shift your legs and notice something else. The fig trees. Planted deliberately near shaded areas, these trees weren't just for fruit. They were nature's umbrellas. Their broad, waxy leaves cast thick shadows, perfect for courtyard corners or quiet reading spots, if you're into reading hieroglyphs carved on leftover pottery shards, which, honestly, why wouldn't you be? And the placement wasn't random. Trees were often planted where they'd cast morning or afternoon shade across living areas. Shade mapping, Egyptian style. You spot a boy climbing one of the trees now, reaching for an early fig. He plucks it, wipes it on his tunic, and drops back to the ground with a grin. He settles beneath the awning and bites into the fruit. You hear the crunch of the skin, the sigh of satisfaction. It's not just sweet, it's cool. Another awning flaps nearby, and for a moment your view is obscured. Just a soft ripple of reed and shadow. You sit back and let it happen, because here the world moves slowly. The sun's a force, yes, but so is shade. Even public markets used awnings. Vendors strung them between stalls, creating narrow walkways of relative peace. Beneath them, jars of oil stayed temperate. Baskets of bread didn't bake, and tempers ran slightly cooler, usually. You imagine navigating one of those markets at midday. Without shade, you'd melt into your sandals. With it, you might actually enjoy bargaining over lentils. And of course, the papyrus wasn't alone. Some homes used palm fronds woven into thick mats and laid over wooden beams. They were heavier, better for blocking wind-driven sand, and even more rustle-prone. the sound of a breeze through palm fronds, like the pages of an enormous book being slowly turned by the gods. You reach up and touch the underside of the awning above you. It's warm, yes, but only on the outside. Beneath, your fingers meet air that's tolerable, even pleasant. The shade doesn't just block heat, it traps calm. And that's the real secret. These weren't architectural afterthoughts. They were survival stitched with string, fabric woven with foresight, cooling not with noise or energy, but with patience. The wind picks up slightly and the awning lifts, just a breath, and settles again. You sigh, lean back on your elbows and close your eyes. Not because you're tired, because this is the temperature of peace. You're still beneath the awning, eyes half closed, body softened by shade and breeze, when a scent teases your senses. Warm, floral, just a little spicy. It drifts past your nose like a memory. Old and familiar, though you can't quite place it. Then you hear a soft plop, followed by a giggle. You sit up. Across the courtyard, a young woman is placing something on the crown of her head. A pale cone, shaped like a scoop of ice cream, balanced atop her hair with the casual precision of someone who's done this hundreds of times. The scent deepens. Stronger now, sweet, rich, and oddly cool? Welcome to the world of perfumed cones and cooling oils, ancient Egypt's most indulgent trick for surviving the heat and smelling like a walking bouquet of lotus blossoms. You move closer, curious. The cone is made of beeswax infused with scented oils and herbs, frankincense, myrrh, lotus, maybe even cinnamon bark. And here's the clever part. Under the hot sun, the cone melts slowly, releasing both fragrance and moisture down the scalp and neck. It's part cooling mechanism, part portable air freshener, and part fashion statement. The wax drips gently through the woman's hair, glistening slightly in the light. She doesn't flinch. In fact, she looks relieved. The cone isn't just functional, it's ceremonial, luxurious, and deeply embedded in social life. A public message that says, I may be melting, but I'm going to smell amazing while I do it. Historians still argue whether these cones were daily wear or reserved for feasts and special events. Some say they were too precious for everyday use. Others insist elite households used them routinely, because why wouldn't you wear a scented glacier on your head if you could? You sit beside her. She smiles, gestures to a small clay dish holding another cone, and nods. You pick it up, heavy for its size, cool to the touch. You place it gently atop your head. At first, nothing. Then a whisper of coolness snakes down your scalp. It's subtle, like mint behind your ears. A trickle of something floral starts to curl through your senses. The tension in your shoulders, that tightness born from sun and sand, eases just slightly. The scent helps you breathe deeper. The wax, melting in time with the sun, follows the path of calm down the nape of your neck. This wasn't a novelty. This was science, well, ancient sensory science. By stimulating scent receptors and gently cooling the skin, these cones help combat the mental fatigue of heat. Even now, perfumers and wellness experts speak about aromatherapy. But the Egyptians? They were already bottling serenity in wax before most cultures had even figured out soap. You glance around the courtyard. Others are wearing cones too, men and women alike. Theirs are different. Some tinted with indigo, others carved with little symbols. One has a lotus petal tucked into the side. Another is plain but fragrant enough to make your eyes close involuntarily. Servants move through the courtyard holding slender-necked jars, alabastrons, used for storing scented oils. They pour tiny amounts into waiting palms, and soon the air fills with competing notes: rose, neroli, cardamom. Each one mingling, none overwhelming. You receive a drop in your own hand. It glistens like honey but feels like silk. You rub it along your forearms, and for a moment you're not just cooler, you're elevated. Like the heat is a problem for other people now. These oils weren't just perfume, they were ritual, each one chosen for its properties: cooling, calming, cleansing. Some were believed to protect against sickness, others were meant to ward off evil spirits, though frankly, If a spirit got past this fragrance wall, it deserved a second look. In temples, priests anointed themselves multiple times a day, sometimes with blends of up to 16 oils. Imagine entering a sanctuary not only filled with incense, but filled with you. Your skin radiating lotus and myrrh, your hair slicked with sacred wax, your very presence wrapped in intentional aroma. And yes, the cones melted onto wigs too, because wigs were everywhere. Shaved heads were cooler, cleaner, more hygienic in the heat. But wigs gave you style, stature, and, when paired with perfumed cones, the ability to cool off without dripping wax directly onto your scalp. Clever. One image in a noblewoman's tomb shows her reclining at a banquet, lotus flower in hand, a large cone perched on her wig, and the caption, roughly translated, reads, "Joy in the scent of the evening." That's not just poetry, it's strategy. You lean back now, your own cone beginning to do its work. The scent of blue lotus swirls around you. It's floral but earthy, ancient yet familiar. You realize you're breathing slower, deeper, the same kind of breathing people do during meditation or right before sleep. Someone begins to play music nearby, a soft flute, the notes gliding like smoke through the warm air. A servant fans the area, not wildly, just enough to keep the scent moving, like your own private weather system, scented and calm. And you wonder, how many nights were made bearable this way? How many feasts didn't turn into fainting spells because everyone smelled like paradise and felt like a cool breeze was trailing their every move? The cone shifts slightly. A little wax trickles lower. You don't flinch. You just close your eyes, because this is what the ancient Egyptians understood better than anyone, that comfort isn't only about temperature, it's about sensation, smell, stillness, ritual, and maybe, just maybe, the joy of melting slowly, on purpose. Evening has wrapped itself around the city like a loose linen robe. The sun is slipping below the horizon, and in its absence, the heat releases its grip. Not completely. Egypt never fully forgets its warmth, but enough that the world exhales. And that's when the rooftops begin to stir again. You follow a narrow stairwell lit by the final glints of twilight, the stone still radiating the memory of day. But it's cooler now, softer. The wind greets you like an old friend. You step onto the rooftop and see them, shapes stretched across mats and blankets, sleeping forms already drifting. Tonight, you're joining them. Sleeping on rooftops wasn't a quirky habit, it was a lifeline. Ancient Egyptian homes, built with thick walls, tiny windows and flat roofs, made it easy to move your whole sleeping situation up to the stars when the heat below became unbearable. And you can feel why. The air up here moves freely, carrying scents of warm fig trees and river mud, of nearby fire pits where someone's still toasting flatbread or heating spiced wine. You lie down on a mat, slightly stiff but wide enough to stretch out. The stone headrest at your side is cool and waiting. Yes, stone. The ancient Egyptian headrest wasn't a pillow like we know it. It was a U-shaped stand carved from limestone or wood, meant to elevate the head and allow air to circulate beneath the neck. At first glance, it seems impossible. How could something so solid be soothing? You give it a try, and to your surprise it fits, cradles the base of your skull, lifts your head just enough to let your shoulders relax, while keeping your airway open and your neck off the warm mat. Smart, really smart. The air kisses the back of your neck. That might be your favorite part. And here, under the night sky, that cooling is everything. A head on warm stone might toss and turn, but a head slightly lifted, that sleeps. You gaze up. Stars are appearing quietly and confidently. The Big Dipper, Orion's belt, though the Egyptians saw it differently, of course. They called it Sa, the embodiment of the god Osiris, rising each night to watch over the living. Beside you, a family settles in, 3 generations across one rooftop. The grandparents already still, the parents whispering softly, and a child lying sprawled, arms wide like she's making sand angels. She murmurs something about a cold moon. Her mother laughs and brushes a linen cloth over her shoulders. It's not just the rooftop that cools, it's the entire ritual, the slow unpacking of mats, the hum of last conversations, the way everyone points their heads toward the breeze, even the way they align themselves like a communal wind compass. You inhale. The night smells faintly of charred wood, distant lotus oil, and, oddly, grapes. Somewhere nearby, someone's cracking open a dried fig or sipping the last of a dinner wine. You want to be annoyed, but instead, you smile. It feels familiar, like camping with gods. And here's the beautiful trick. Nothing is rushing. No clocks, no schedules. Just the rhythm of night, the rhythm of breeze. You shift your legs under the blanket. A little cooler now, you drape one arm over your chest and let the other hang off the side of the mat. That air sweeping under the awning feels like it was tailored for you. Occasionally, someone stirs. Someone coughs. Someone lets out a full, echoing snore that startles a pigeon off a nearby rooftop. No one minds. These are the sounds of a night spent right. Historians still argue how widespread this rooftop habit was. Some claim only the poor slept there, too hot to stay inside. Others argue the wealthy preferred it, especially in cities like Thebes, where breezes from the river turned roofs into beachfront property. The truth, as always, probably lives somewhere in between. Because let's be honest, cool air doesn't care about class. Above you, the stars sharpen. You can just make out the Milky Way stretching overhead like a divine river, a pale twin to the Nile below. Priests once taught that the soul of the dead sailed this sky river each night, returning to earth at dawn in the body of the rising sun. You consider that. Then consider how your own soul, if given the chance, might like to hang out up here a little longer, maybe sail a while before slipping back into the noise of daylight. Someone has placed a reed screen around part of the rooftop, windbreak or privacy curtain, you're not sure. Either way, it shifts gently, tapping against the floor with a dry thuk, thuk, thuk. Another rhythm, another lullaby. You turn slightly. The stone headrest shifts with you, supporting the movement without resistance. It's not cloud soft, but it's clean, purposeful, like being held by someone who understands boundaries. A nearby woman lights a small cone of incense, myrrh by the smell. The smoke coils upward, a single thread toward the sky. Maybe it's for mosquitoes, maybe it's for dreams, maybe both. The air is thinner now, cooler. You feel your body relax in stages like someone's slowly untying you. You close your eyes. The last thing you hear is wind brushing linen. A mother's low voice, the soft creak of wood settling under the weight of a cooling world. And then nothing. Just breath and breeze and stars. The world awakens slowly again, but this time it's not the sun nudging you, it's something different. A presence. A vibration in the air, the kind that brushes across your skin before your ears can catch it. You open your eyes and blink at the grey-blue morning sky, still soft with dew. And there, perched at the corner of the rooftop, is a statue. Small, stocky, broad face with wide eyes and a beard that sticks out like a broom. He's grinning and sticking out his tongue. You blink again, say hello to Bess, ancient Egypt's most protective, most ridiculous, most beloved deity of the household, and perhaps the only god in history to pull double duty as a bouncer and a bedtime buddy. Bess wasn't a sleek jackal or a golden falcon. He wasn't mysterious like Thoth or terrifying like Sekhmet. No, Bess was short, stubby-legged, wild-haired, and utterly unfazed by danger, which made him perfect for his job, keeping you safe while you slept, and sometimes keeping you cool while you did it. You rise from the rooftop mat and wander down into the house. There he is again, painted on a doorway beam, and again carved into a headrest, and once more inked on a piece of linen, tucked under someone's pillow, always wide-eyed, always grinning, always ready. See, Bess was the ultimate guardian spirit, protector of children, defender of dreams, and sworn enemy of anything that slithered, buzzed, or went bump in the night. He was especially loved in bedrooms. His job? To stand guard at the threshold between waking and sleeping, and yes, between cool comfort and the fiery tantrum of Egyptian heat. Some depictions even show Bes with fans, literal palm leaf fans, held in both stubby hands like he's shooing away mosquitoes and evil spirits with equal enthusiasm. Imagine drifting off to sleep knowing your nightstand is spiritually guarded by a divine goblin who waves cooling breezes and makes rude faces at nightmares. Who wouldn't sleep better? You follow the painted trail of Bes through the home, over door lintels, under beds, even stamped onto jars of scented oil. He's everywhere. He's welcomed everywhere. Not in grand temples, mind you. He didn't care much for high ceremony, but in kitchens, bedrooms, courtyards, anywhere real life happened. And this wasn't just superstition. The presence of Bes, often carved into stone or molded into protective amulets, gave real comfort to people living in a hot, unpredictable world. His face was a reminder, you are safe, you are watched over. And if anything tries to mess with your sleep, it'll have to deal with him first. You step into a shaded room, linen draped from the ceiling, the light golden and filtered. A woman sleeps on a low bed, her newborn swaddled beside her. Above them, a small wooden figurine of Bes hangs from a string. It spins slowly in the breeze, its carved eyes wide, its tongue out in defiance. This wasn't decoration, this was defense, and it worked. Historians still argue whether Bes was originally a foreign deity brought in from Nubia or native to early Egyptian folklore. His strange proportions, his dwarf-like shape, his odd expressions, they don't match the symmetry and grace of traditional Egyptian gods, and that's why people loved him. Bes wasn't perfect, he was personal. He wasn't for kings, he was for you. You walk past a family preparing for evening rest. One child clutches a small amulet carved in the shape of Bes. Another has a bedtime song that ends with a whispered line, "Let the lion man dance in the dark." You can almost see it. Bes stomping and twirling at the foot of the bed, shaking a rattle, chasing away bad dreams and hot air alike. In a land where heat crept into every crack and crevice, and where illness, insects and spirits were constant concerns, Bes was a comfort of a different kind. No fanfare, no sacrifices, just a funny, fierce face saying, "You sleep, I'll handle it." Even the priests who tended to their rows of tall gods and solemn chants wore Bes amulets under their robes, because even the most devout know that at 2 a.m., when your skin sticks to your mat and the air won't move, it's not always Horus you want. Sometimes you just want someone stubby and furious to clear the air. Later, you learn that dancers were sometimes trained to mimic Bes in temple festivals. They'd paint their faces, stick out their tongues, and perform exaggerated movements meant to chase away evil. People cheered, laughed, slept better that night. You return to the rooftop. The morning is warming now, but still gentle. You find a small Bes charm tied to the corner of your mat. Someone must have left it there while you slept. You smile. You lie back again, arms behind your head, watching the sun begin to rise for real. Its golden light hits the rooftops in layers, but the breeze hasn't left yet. It lingers a little longer, as if someone's still fanning it toward you. You close your eyes and feel the stone headrest beneath you, and somewhere in the shadows of your sleepy thoughts, you hear a distant rattle, cheerful, rhythmic, just a little ridiculous. Bes is still dancing, and you are still cool. The sun climbs higher now, though it's not yet cruel. Light stretches across the rooftops like a lazy cat, slow and golden. You sit up, stretch your arms, and prepare for the heat to return. But today, you're ready, because you've heard the whispers. And the whispers say, crocodile dung sunscreen. Yes, really. You climb down into the shaded courtyard, sandals slapping softly on stone. A cluster of women are preparing their morning cosmetics. They sit around baskets of crushed herbs, jars of oil, chunks of resin, and bowls of mysterious paste. One of them notices your curious stare and grins. She points to a wide-mouthed clay pot and gestures for you to take a whiff. You lean in. It's earthy, pungent, not unpleasant exactly, but not something you'd smear on your body without some serious faith. The woman laughs and dips her fingers into the mix. then smooths a streak of it onto her arms. She points to the sun, then to her skin. The message is clear. This keeps the fire away. So yes, there it is. The infamous crocodile dung mixture. A legend, a mystery, and depending on who you ask, a very ancient SPF 30. According to several scribes' records and interpretations of medical papyri, a blend of natron, plant oils, and yes, crocodile droppings was sometimes used as a protective balm against the sun. It was smeared on exposed skin, particularly during long days working in the fields or before desert travel. Now let's be fair, historians still argue whether this concoction was really for sun protection or something more symbolic. Was it medicinal? Ritual? Just another case of let's try smearing things on our bodies and see what works. The debate goes on, but the idea of using the waste of a creature so revered and feared makes a certain Egyptian kind of sense. Crocodiles were sacred, dangerous. Tied to the god Sobek, lord of the Nile, war, fertility, and very large teeth. To wear something from a crocodile on your skin might have been more than just practical. It could have been a magical form of camouflage, a way of saying, "Don't eat me, cousin." You watch as one woman adds a few drops of lotus oil to her mixture, stirring with a carved wooden spatula. That changes everything. The scent lifts, softens, becomes floral. Still earthy, but elegant now, like wearing the swamp's finest perfume. She pats it gently onto her cheeks and forehead. The result? A dewy finish, slightly green-tinted, but she looks proud of it. Regal even. This wasn't shameful. It was protection. And maybe power. Others in the courtyard take a different route. One woman prefers a smoother balm made of almond oil and crushed melon rind. Another uses ground carob mixed with beeswax. These were the more spa-like options, less aggressive on the nose, but still part of the ancient Egyptian heat-beating toolkit. You're offered a choice, melon balm or croc dung. You choose melon for now. The balm is cool on your skin, surprisingly light. It sinks in fast, leaving a faint sweetness behind. It doesn't block out the sun, not entirely, but it takes the sting off, like you're wearing a second, smarter layer of skin. Later, in temple reliefs and tomb paintings, you'll spot this all over again. Noble women with green-tinged skin, priests anointing their bodies before long rituals, even servants in the background applying protective pastes before working the fields. These weren't beauty routines, they were heat survival kits. And the cosmetics weren't just about temperature. They were also defense, against sunburn, yes, but also flies, dryness, infection. Some balms included crushed lead or galena for sun protection, though that came with less than cool side effects like eventual organ failure. Ancient wisdom occasionally came at a price. Still, the logic was sound. Reflective pigments blocked rays, thick balms retained moisture, herbs soothed burns. Even the crocodile dung, gross as it sounds, had antimicrobial properties. Somewhere between mysticism and medicine, people made it work. You stroll into the street now, passing others, glistening faintly under their protective layers. The scents of the city swirl, sweet myrrh, sweat, river mud, and yes, a hint of dung in the breeze. But it's normal here, it's accepted, it's part of life. At a small market stall, a vendor sells tiny alabaster jars of ointments. One is labelled simply, "for sun." You pick it up. It's surprisingly cool, as if it remembers the shadow it came from. You imagine keeping this in a pouch at your waist, dabbing a bit onto your face when the heat begins to claw at your patience. Nearby, a scribe dips his reed pen and murmurs something under his breath about the blessed protection of Sobek's touch. You don't ask, you just nod. Everyone has their way of dealing with the sun. And here's what you've learned. Comfort doesn't always look clean. Survival is rarely neat. Sometimes it smells weird. Sometimes it's green. Sometimes it's very questionably sourced. But if it helps you stay cool in 110-degree heat, you'll bless the dung and move on. You return to the courtyard. The women are laughing now, comparing the shine on their arms. One flexes her bicep proudly. "Sobek protects this one," she declares, and everyone howls. You sit down beside them, skin warm but not burning. And you realize something strange. For the first time all day, the sun doesn't feel like an enemy. It just feels like a neighbor, one you've finally figured out how to live with. The sun stands high now, confident and wide-eyed, spreading itself across every rooftop, courtyard, and temple like it owns the place. Which, let's be honest, it sort of does. You're walking slowly now, not because you're tired, but because the heat demands it. Rushing would be rude. But as you round the corner of a noble's estate, something tall and strange rises in the distance. A chimney? In ancient Egypt? You squint? No. Not a chimney. A tower, narrow at the base, widening slightly near the top, carved with decorative slits and open mouths in different directions. You've just discovered an ancient wind catcher, a marvel of low-tech engineering and one of the cleverest tools Egyptians used to turn air into comfort. You step closer. This wind catcher is integrated into the house's upper structure, designed to rise just high enough to greet the cooler air currents above the city's heat. The openings at the top, some shaped like lion mouths, others like slender slits, aren't ornamental. They're directional and functional. You duck inside the home, and you feel it. The air here moves, not a gale, not a draft, but a steady, gentle pull, as if the house is breathing through its own nose, and in a way it is. Wind catchers, known later in Persia as badgirs, were essentially passive air conditioning towers. They harnessed prevailing winds, channeled them downward into the rooms below, and allowed hot air to escape upward. Even when no breeze stirred outside, the design leveraged the difference in air pressure to encourage movement. You raise your hand and yes, there's a faint stream of cool air slipping past your fingertips. You smile. This is no accident. Someone thought this through. Historians still debate just how widespread wind catchers were in ancient Egypt. Some argue that full-fledged badger-style towers didn't appear until later Persian influence. Others insist that Egyptians had their own primitive versions far earlier, using reed ducts, rooftop vents, or tower-like ventilators like the one you're standing beneath now. Whatever the truth, you're inside one, and it's working. The air is channeled downward into this room, which is surprisingly large, maybe a receiving space or an office for a scribe. The ceiling slopes upward toward the wind catcher's mouth, giving the hot air a place to rise and escape. Meanwhile, the lower parts remain blessedly cooler. You sit in a corner and watch the curtains sway slightly. Not dramatically, but enough to know the house is alive. It exhales heat. It inhales relief. And the placement is strategic. Wind catchers were often built to face the prevailing winds off the Nile. If you built yours wrong, it didn't work. Face it, right? Instant breeze trap. The smarter households even added flaps to redirect airflow, and sometimes water jars were placed beneath the shaft's opening, so the incoming breeze passed over water before entering the room. Boom, evaporative cooling. You walk into the next chamber, which is deeper into the house, and the effect is even more pronounced. The floor is alabaster, polished and cold underfoot. The wind catcher feeds into a shaft here, and below that, a jar of water, just as expected. The air in this room feels like a whisper against your skin. Not cold, but content. Imagine living like this. Designing not just for heat, but with it. Working alongside the sun and wind instead of building walls and praying for rain. You run your hand along the base of the shaft. It's dry, clean, smoothed by decades of air passing over it. A servant walks by with a bundle of linen, glances up at the tower, and gives it a quiet nod of approval. "Good wind today," she murmurs. In the wealthier districts, wind catchers weren't just functional, they became status symbols. Tall towers meant better airflow. Better airflow meant better sleep, cooler feasts, and calmer tempers. Some noble homes even had multiple towers facing different directions, so no matter which way the wind shifted, the house stayed comfortable. You can almost hear them. "Oh, your tower only faces north. How quaint." In rural homes, simpler versions existed. Rooftop holes covered with woven reeds, angled ducts made from clay or wood. even a pot with a fan-shaped opening above it, turned just right to catch that rare gust. But this tower you're sitting under? It's air magic. The sound is part of it too. A soft, low hum, not loud enough to disturb, just enough to notice. Like the house is whispering to itself. The breeze continues, now carrying a trace of sweet herbs. Someone's grinding mint in a nearby kitchen. You close your eyes. You feel the airflow settle over your face, brushing your forehead, your cheek, the tips of your fingers. No motors, no wires, no fuel, just structure, thought, patience. You open your eyes and glance upward. The top of the tower is just visible, a square of light, framed in darkness, like a piece of sky cut out for you. There's something comforting about it, knowing that this room asks the wind to visit instead of chasing it away. You lie back against a cool wall, let your body stretch. You're not in a palace, you're not at the river, you're inside stone and reed and thought, and somehow you're comfortable. Wind catchers didn't promise icy cold, they promised relief. And they delivered. Outside, the sun glares against the earth. Inside, the tower breathes. And you breathe with it. The sun is past its zenith now, spilling sideways light that turns the world honey gold and shadow blue. You've drifted through enough courtyards and cool corners to feel the rhythm of the day, one that isn't about hours or schedules, but about temperature. And as you pass under another stone archway, your feet whispering across smooth flagstones, a hush falls over the air. It's different here, deeper, darker. You're entering a temple. The change is immediate. Light dims. Sound thickens. The stone walls swell on either side of you, not in grandeur, but in coolness. It's like stepping into the lungs of the earth. You exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath. Inside, it's not just cooler. It's quietly cold. Welcome to Egypt's sacred cave, the temple, where heat came to surrender. These vast structures dedicated to gods like Amun, Hathor, Isis weren't just spiritual sanctuaries, they were temperature sanctuaries, designed not only to impress and inspire, but to provide physical relief from the all-seeing, all-burning eye of Ra. You glide forward. Columns rise around you like stone papyrus stalks, carved and painted in now faded colors. The corridor narrows, each step drawing you deeper into the temple's shadowy throat. And here's the trick, it's not just that there's shade, it's that the very architecture was engineered for chill. The walls are impossibly thick, sometimes 10 feet or more. The ceilings soar, leaving hot air to drift up and away. The narrow passages limit how much sunlight ever makes it inside. Some rooms never see a sunbeam in their entire existence. And the stone itself, sandstone, limestone, granite, acts like a cold sponge. It pulls warmth from the air and holds it silently. You place your palm on the wall, smooth, dry, cold. This was intentional. In many temples, the innermost sanctum, the naos, was designed to be the darkest, quietest, and coolest place in the building. It was here the god's statue was kept, tended to by priests in whispered rituals. It wasn't just sacred because of religion. It was sacred because the temperature itself changed you. You stand still. The temperature hugs you. This is no breeze-cooled courtyard or jar-sweating hallway. This is geological comfort, a space carved out of sun, immune to its tantrums. Outside, the world might be baking, but in here, you could meditate, you could nap, you could survive. Some scholars suggest that the inspiration for Egyptian temples came from natural caves, where early peoples felt safe, shielded, blessed by the earth's embrace. And standing here, you understand, this temple doesn't fight the desert. It retreats from it. You move forward again. Candles flicker from bronze bowls along the floor, casting warm puddles of light that don't heat the room. They barely touch it. In one side chamber, a priest chants softly, head bowed, hands resting on an alabaster offering bowl. He's barefoot. Everyone here is. Less noise, more awareness. Every step is part of the temperature ritual. You pause before a stone doorway leading into an even darker space. Just above it, carved deep into the lintel, is a sun disk, half hidden in shadow. A reminder that even the sun must step carefully here. Now here's a wild detail. In some temple designs, there are subtle air channels cut through upper walls or columns. Historians still argue whether these were structural, spiritual, or early forms of passive ventilation. One theory suggests that as the cool air settled and warm air rose, these high vents allowed heat to escape, like the temple was quietly exhaling centuries of stored breath. Maybe that's myth, maybe that's math. But the effect is real. You're standing in a room that is cooler than any place you've been all day, and it was built over 3,000 years ago. You kneel. The stone beneath your knees sends a faint chill through your bones. You feel awake, but not in the way caffeine jolts you. This is elemental alertness. You belong here. Even outside the grand temples, similar cave-like structures existed, spears or temples carved directly into rock. They weren't just marvels of engineering, they were practical. Set deep into cliffs, often facing away from the harshest sun, they kept a steady temperature year-round. In tombs, too, the coolness was part of the passage to the afterlife. Bodies weren't just preserved with oils and linen, they were placed deep within stone structures where heat couldn't reach. Eternity was chilly, and that was the point. You rise now, slowly, not wanting to disturb the stillness. The air is heavier here, but in the best way, like a thick curtain of calm draped across your shoulders. You exit the temple, stepping once more into sunlight. It hits you instantly, warm, bold, a touch cocky, as if to say, "Thought you could hide from me?" You smile, because you did hide from it. You learned how to step away, not with machines or gadgets, but with space, with design, with deep patience. Behind you, the temple looms like a mountain, silent, shadowed, cool to the very bones of the earth. And as you walk forward, you carry a little of that coolness with you, a souvenir from a sacred cave. You walk slowly now, feet warmed again by sun-splashed stone, though your body still carries the calm weight of the temple's shadow. The breeze outside is faint but welcome. It trails its fingers along your arms, as if reluctant to speak too loudly after the hush of sacred space. But there's a question nudging at you. What about the great pyramids, the tombs of kings, the stone giants that rule the horizon with their sharp geometry and ancient stillness? Could they possibly have anything to do with cooling? You follow that question toward Giza, and as you arrive at the base of Khufu's pyramid, the world changes scale. Stone rises above you in angled tiers, taller than anything should be, heavier than logic wants to admit. These blocks have baked in the sun for thousands of years. You'd think the air would boil around them, but step closer, reach out, place your hand on the ancient limestone. It's warm, but not hot. In fact, lower down where the sun hasn't yet struck, it's cool. Surprisingly so. You press your cheek to the stone and blink. This thing, this titanic triangle, is hiding something. Inside the pyramid, it's different again. You enter through the descending passage, a sloped tunnel that pulls you downward like a whisper. Light fades fast, the air thickens, and the temperature? It drops. Just a few feet in and you already feel the shift, away from the sun, away from the shimmer of heat. It's not cold, but it's undeniably cooler than the outside world. And as you go deeper, it becomes more pronounced. Not icy, not damp, just still. Like the pyramids swallowed the weather and decided not to share. You crouch and pass through the low grand gallery, its walls narrowing in that strange inverted V shape, leading upward to the king's chamber. The stone is granite here, red, polished, heavy with history. And the air, it's dead quiet and cool. Historians and engineers have puzzled over this for centuries. There's no active ventilation, and yet the internal temperature of the pyramid remains stable, typically hovering around 68, 72, 20, regardless of the blazing desert above it. That's cooler than most people's living rooms. What? That's where the debates begin. Some believe the pyramid's massive thermal mass, those millions of stone blocks, absorbs and slowly disperses heat, regulating the inner environment like a natural refrigerator. Others argue that the positioning of air shafts, once thought to be symbolic, may actually serve subtle ventilation purposes. Still others, especially fringe theorists, propose more fantastical ideas: energy chambers, harmonic frequencies, lost ancient tech. But regardless of the reason, the result is the same. The pyramid is cool, literally, and it's not just the main pyramid. In satellite pyramids and smaller burial chambers nearby, similar effects occur. Step inside and the heat hushes. Stand still and the sweat dries. Even in the Valley of the Kings, where tombs snake deep into the limestone hills, the temperature drops with every step downward. These weren't random designs. The ancient Egyptians knew the sun was no joke, and when building for eternity, you built for coolness. You lie on a smooth ledge inside the chamber, hands folded on your stomach. The air feels ancient, undisturbed, like it's been waiting just for you. Now think about this. You're lying in a structure that's been sealed, breached, resealed, and studied for over 4,500 years, and yet it still holds this eerie, perfect calm. Heat never quite makes it in. Wind doesn't bother. The pyramid guards its silence with a temperature all its own. Some engineers believe that the shape itself, the pyramid form, might help with thermal regulation. Its slope, its alignment to true north, its perfect symmetry, all combining to deflect heat while drawing in coolness through the base and keeping it trapped inside like a gift. Or maybe it's just incredibly lucky architecture. But even if it's all coincidence, you still feel it. You stand again, brushing your palms along the walls, feeling the subtle, sweat-free air cling to your skin. This isn't just a tomb, it's a monument to permanence. And what is cooler than something that refuses to change? Outside, the wind kicks up as if in jealousy. The heat roars at your back. But inside, the pyramid doesn't care. It holds its breath, its shade, its secrets. You exit slowly, blinking into the sunlight. The difference hits you like a blanket. You're sweating within seconds, and you realize if someone invited you to sleep inside that chamber tonight, you'd say yes. Not for mystery, not for history, but for the temperature, because nothing says peace like ancient air. The air outside the pyramid feels heavier now, not just from the sun, but from the strange silence it left behind. That coolness inside lingers like a memory on your skin, and for a moment you want to turn around and crawl right back in. But the desert always beckons, and so does the water. You head back toward the city, past fields of tall grain and rows of date palms swaying lazily. The land flattens, and ahead, shimmering in the light, you see what looks like a low basin carved into the earth. As you approach, lotus blossoms come into view, wide open, pink and white, drifting gently across the surface of a still, dark pool. You've found a lotus pool, a piece of paradise the Egyptians designed not for worship, not for irrigation, but for simple, deliberate comfort. You step closer. The air shifts again. It always does, near water, just a few degrees cooler, a little damper, a little more forgiving. You take a seat beneath a drooping palm and let your toes skim the edge. The water is warm, but not hot. And beneath the surface? Life. Small fish, snails, papyrus roots. In ancient Egypt, these pools weren't just pretty garden features. They were cooling engines, placed strategically in courtyards, temple gardens, and noble estates. They offered shade, reflection, scent, and even air conditioning of the passive, lily-scented kind. Here's how it worked. The water itself stored coolness overnight, then released it slowly during the day. Shade trees planted nearby doubled that effect, creating a microclimate that was always a little more bearable than the scorched streets. And the lotus flowers? They weren't just symbolic, they were sensory wonders. Their leaves floated wide, casting mini shadows. Their scent drifted upward, floral but fresh, sweet but clean. It mixed with the breeze to perfume the very air you breathed. You pick a lotus petal from the water and rub it between your fingers. Silky, cool, resilient. Children once played in these pools. You can picture them now, splashing gently, scooping water into shallow clay bowls, watching as petals swirled. Some families even floated oil lamps on lotus leaves at night, the flames flickering against dark water, the reflections dancing on whitewashed walls nearby. You lie back on a reed mat stretched along the edge. A servant passes, adjusting an awning overhead. She dips a cloth into the water and lays it across her shoulders. You do the same. The fabric is cool at first, then warming slowly, releasing comfort like a whisper. And there's more. In some pools, platforms were built, flat, stone walkways that stretched just above the waterline so nobles could stroll barefoot in the heat without feeling it. The stones were wet with spray. And if you walked slow enough, it felt like moving through a different world. At the far side of the pool, a gardener is trimming papyrus. He hums quietly, his feet in the water, a pile of reeds growing beside him. The papyrus cools the water just as the water cools the air. It's all part of a rhythm. Plant, water, air, shade. Nothing wasted. You close your eyes and breathe in. It smells like earth and mint and thyme. Historians still debate how widespread lotus pools were. Some say they were luxuries of the rich. Others argue they were more common, built into homes, temples, even schools. But there's no question that wherever they appeared, they transformed the space. Because there's something about still water that changes how you feel the heat. The air doesn't fight your skin anymore, it glides. The noise of the day, vendors, sandals, goats, fans, fades into background murmur. The pool absorbs it, calms it, reflects it back as peace. You dip your fingers again, the ripples move outward, brushing against a resting lotus. The flower bobs unaffected, like it's used to weathering movement, like it's practiced in patience. In temples, lotus pools had another purpose. Priests bathed in them before rituals. Scribes washed their hands before transcribing sacred texts. The water wasn't just clean, it was cleansing. Not just of sweat, but of spirit. You wonder what that means now in your stillness. The fish beneath the surface flick their tails, darting between roots. You spot one, golden and fat, hovering like a meditative bubble. Above, a heron passes silently. Its wings beat the air only once before gliding off toward the Nile. The breeze returns. It crosses the surface of the pool and reaches you, carrying with it a chill, so subtle, so earned, it makes your skin rise just slightly in thanks. You lie back, eyes open. The sky is blue. The water is calm. And in that space between earth and reflection, you find a kind of quiet the sun can't reach. You linger by the lotus pool longer than you mean to. It's hard to leave, the hush, the breeze, the way the reflections seem to slow time itself. But eventually, the world beckons and you rise again, feet damp and skin slightly cooled, scented faintly with green things and sun. As you wander back toward the inner parts of the house, you pass a shaded alcove. A row of alabaster jars rests there on a low shelf, their pearly surfaces gleaming even in the soft light. You stop. Not just because they're beautiful, but because one of them, when you touch it, is cool to the fingers. Genuinely cool. Stored cosmetics, you realize. You lift the lid of the nearest jar. Inside, a thick, white cream. Smooth, fragrant, with a hint of peppermint and something floral. You run a small dab along your wrist. It tingles, refreshes, invites the skin to breathe. This was no accident. The ancient Egyptians weren't just masters of architecture and water. They understood body temperature and how to manage it through personal care. These jars weren't left in the sun. They were kept in shadowed corners in stone alcoves, even half buried in cool earth, to preserve the temperature and consistency of the contents inside. And oh, what contents they were. Scented oils infused with lotus or myrrh. Balms made with almond oil, beeswax, and crushed herbs. Powders of crushed turquoise or malachite that, when pressed to the skin, provided both decoration and relief from glare. They didn't just colour your face, they cooled it. You pick up a second jar, this one sealed more tightly. You pry it open gently. Inside, a creamy blend of something that smells faintly of cucumber and clay. This one, a sun repair ointment. The kind rubbed on cheeks and shoulders after a long day in the fields, or after dozing too long by the pool. These weren't luxuries, they were tools. Even the choice of containers was strategic. Alabaster, with its natural cooling properties and ability to insulate, kept ointments usable for weeks, even months. It didn't overheat, it resisted decay, and it always looked beautiful, milk white, glowing faintly in candlelight, like it held moonlight under its lid. You sit near the shelf, one jar in hand. A servant appears, older, eyes kind. She gestures toward a small bowl of water and dips a cloth in. She hands it to you and watches, waiting. You take the cloth and wipe your face gently. The moisture is warm but not hot. When you apply the cream, the difference is immediate. It doesn't just smell good, it feels good. Soothing, cooling, like slipping back into a shadow. She smiles, satisfied, and moves on. In wealthier homes, cosmetics weren't just stored carefully, they were stored intelligently. Some families even had separate chambers for them, small, cool rooms with narrow ventilation slits, thick walls, and stone floors, not to show off but to keep oils from melting and powders from spoiling. Historians still argue whether these cosmetic rooms were reserved for the elite, or whether middle-class households had their own simplified versions, perhaps a shaded jar in a dugout corner, or a small cache of oil pots beneath a stairwell. But one thing is certain, coolness was part of the design. The cosmetics themselves were made for the heat. Oils that absorbed slowly, leaving a dry finish, powders that reflected sunlight, resins that softened the skin without clogging it in the heat. These weren't vanity products, they were climate armor. Even perfumes served a dual purpose. Yes, they made you smell like divine incense, but many also had antiseptic and insect-repelling properties. A dab behind the ears could mean the difference between sleeping soundly or slapping mosquitoes until dawn. You glance again at the jars. Each one is different. Some are squat and wide, others tall and slim. Some have painted lids, lotuses, eyes, tiny jackals. One is shaped like a pomegranate, its surface dimpled like the fruit itself. You pick it up. It's cold, almost impossibly so. You realize someone placed it in a stone basin nearby, partially filled with water. It sat there all day, absorbing coolness like a sponge, waiting to be opened at the right moment. You crack the lid. Inside, a rose-scented ointment, delicate, slightly tinted pink. You dip your fingertip and press it to your collarbone. A subtle shiver trails down your spine. Not from cold, but from contrast. From feeling, just for a moment, like the sun forgot about you. You lie back, still cradling the little pomegranate jar. The stone behind you is warm, your skin is not, and you wonder how many evenings passed like this. Women gently smoothing balm across each other's arms, men rubbing oil into their scalps, children chasing each other with petals and powders, coolness shared like laughter. You close your eyes. The scent of rose lingers, a breeze touches your cheek, and in the stillness of that alabaster moment you learn that cool isn't just a temperature, it's a way of caring. You wake from a short, dreamless nap, still resting near that row of alabaster jars, your cheek cool where it pressed against the smooth stone floor. The scent of rose balm clings to your skin like a whisper from the past. Outside, the sun has mellowed just a bit, but the heat still rules, draped over the city like a sleeping cat that refuses to move. You rise slowly, stretch, and wander into the open courtyard of the house. There's movement here, purposeful, rhythmic. A servant stands beside a wide, shallow clay bowl balanced on a reed stand. In her hand, a simple wooden ladle. She stirs the water gently. Then she dips a strip of linen into it, wrings it out with practiced hands, and begins wiping down the walls. You pause. Wiping the walls, yes. And not just once, She's working methodically, starting from the shaded edge of the inner wall and moving outward, sweeping long, even strokes across the baked clay. The wall darkens with moisture, and then the air shifts, ever so slightly. You step closer and realize what she's doing. She's cooling the house using one of Egypt's oldest, simplest tricks, evaporative cooling. Wet the surface. Let the breeze do the rest. It's clever, it's low-tech, and it works. As water evaporates from the clay, it pulls heat from the surface. That means the walls themselves begin to radiate less heat into the room. Add a bit of breeze from an open door or a rooftop vent, and the temperature inside can drop a few precious, wonderful degrees. And in this climate, that's everything. She gestures to another woman nearby who pours fresh water into the bowl. This one's mixed with crushed mint and a few stems of papyrus. The scent lifts gently as she stirs. A small boy, maybe 6, runs through the courtyard laughing, arms out like wings. He slides slightly on the damp stones and squeals with delight. The air here is alive. And the water, it isn't wasted. After it finishes its cooling duty, it's collected in shallow troughs and used to water the courtyard plants or clean feet before prayers. Efficiency always. You crouch by one wall, press your palm flat against the freshly dampened surface. It's not cold, but it's no longer radiating heat like a stove. Instead, it's balanced, gentle, bearable. Historians still argue whether the technique was practiced mostly in homes or if temples and administrative buildings employed it too. Some say it's too domestic to appear in official records. Others suggest you can read between the lines in certain descriptions of ritual cleansing. But regardless of how it was recorded, the act speaks for itself. Water plus wall equals relief. In some houses, this technique was taken further. Cloths were hung across doorways and soaked throughout the day, creating cool, dripping curtains. Others placed bowls of water near vents or windows so that incoming air would be moistened as it entered. Add a drop of scented oil, and you had DIY aromatherapy. You see it all around you now. One cloth canopy is slightly wet to the touch, fluttering in the breeze. Another is woven from linen and palm, soaking slowly in a basin. Above a doorway, reeds have been dipped and laid across the lintel. Drops of water fall rhythmically into a waiting dish. It's not a flood. It's a rhythm, a heartbeat, a strategy. The best part? No moving parts, no waste, no buzz of machinery, just time, water, and wisdom. One elder enters the courtyard, a folded cloth draped over his shoulder. He pauses, sighs, and presses the cloth to his face. He sits near the wall, and a child joins him, leaning against his side. Neither speaks. They just sit in the wet-shadowed calm, letting the stone, the shade, and the damp air do their work. You walk on, past another corner where someone's poured water across the floor. It puddles slightly, then slowly evaporates, cooling the room from the ground up. You wonder, how many thousands of years did people do this? Without manuals, without apps, just instinct and inheritance. Someone once figured it out, passed it to a daughter or a son who then passed it again. The technique slipped through generations like water through fingers, always moving, never gone. You dip your own cloth into the minty bowl, squeeze it once and wipe your arms. The tingling sensation is instant. You press it to the back of your neck. Bliss. You understand now why people walked around with strips of wet linen like sacred talismans. Because when the air won't move and the sun won't set and your skin starts to feel like a memory of fire, water becomes a kind of magic. Not dramatic, not icy, just enough. Enough to keep you comfortable. Enough to keep you sane. Enough to remind you that even under a desert sun, you're not powerless. Just patient. The mint-laced cloth dries slowly against your skin as you step back into the outer alleyways, the air now carrying that warm golden hue that means late afternoon in Egypt. The sun is no longer burning overhead but angling low, throwing shadows like brushstrokes across mud-brick walls. You pass a group of workers lounging in the shade of a columned porch, their linen tunics rumpled, faces glistening with sweat and dust. They're laughing, low, contented, a kind of laughter only heard once the hardest heat of the day has passed. And beside them, earthenware jars, big ones, round, broad-bellied, and nestled carefully into woven mats or half-buried in cool earth, zers. Clay jars designed not just to hold water, but to cool it. You wander over, curiosity drawing you like gravity. One of the workers sees your glance and grins. He lifts the lid from one of the jars and dips a cup in, offering it to you without ceremony. The cup is rough, sun-warmed on the outside, but the water? Cool. You sip and sigh. It tastes of minerals, dust, thyme, and the faintest hint of clay. And it is glorious. You're drinking from one of the earliest forms of refrigeration, porous clay cooling. The jar isn't glazed, that's the secret. It sweats, slowly, invisibly. As water inside presses outward through the microscopic pores of the clay, it evaporates into the air, pulling heat from the water left behind. Result? A natural drop in temperature. Simple physics elegantly applied. You run your hand along the jar's surface. It's damp, just enough. The mat beneath it catches the slow seep, keeping the ground dry, and the jar's shape helps too, wide at the belly, narrow at the neck. That design minimizes surface area up top, preserving the chill below. This was no accident. Egyptians placed these cooling jars near windows in breezeways or beneath shade cloths to amplify the effect. Some were even suspended by rope, gently swaying to encourage airflow. And do you know what else? They made them beautiful. Some jars were etched with lotus patterns, others with symbols of coolness, waves, birds, palm fronds, not just functional but symbolic. An oasis in clay form. One of the men clinks his cup against yours in a lazy toast, then flops back down onto his mat. Another rolls a cool stone across his forehead, eyes closed in contentment. A child nearby carries a small version of the jar, his own personal zir, tied around his waist with a cord, a drinking spout fashioned from palm wood sticking out like a tiny horn. You can't help but smile. Historians still argue whether these jars were used strictly for water or also for storing oils, wine, even cooling food. Some murals suggest multiple uses, jars filled with figs and fish, kept in shaded recesses beside water vessels, early pantries that doubled as desert refrigerators. In wealthier homes, these jars were stored in cooling alcoves, sunken niches in kitchen walls or courtyards, often lined with clay or stone. The deeper the niche, the better the insulation. Add a damp cloth cover? Instant low-tech fridge. Some had even more flair. Jars stacked on stone shelves in breezy towers or built into small channels where water flowed around them, enhancing the evaporative effect. Luxury, but still completely natural. And the brilliance doesn't stop there. Later, Egyptian potters began adding charcoal dust to the clay mixture, darkening the jars and increasing their heat-absorbing efficiency. Others experimented with dual-layered vessels, a jar within a jar, with water or wet sand in between, like Russian nesting dolls for hydration. You sit back against the porch post, the cup still cool in your hand, the air beginning to shift toward evening. The shadows are longer now. A cat slinks past the jars, its tail flicking lazily. A soft breeze moves through the alley, lifting the scent of cooling clay and mint from your skin. You watch as one man carefully refills the zir, pouring from a leather water bag slung over his shoulder. The moment is almost ceremonial. He doesn't spill a drop. The lid is replaced. The jar hums quietly in the heat, doing its slow, ancient work. This is what cooling looks like when you don't have wires. This is what relief feels like when it's hand-built, earth-spun, and sun-respected. You glance down at the small crack in the rim of your cup. It doesn't matter. Nothing here is pristine. Everything works. That's the beauty of it. You set the cup down beside you, let your back rest fully against the mud brick, and exhale. The jar beside you continues its gentle sweat. The air cools by degrees. And for a moment, one long, lazy, sweet moment, you feel like maybe the heat wasn't such a beast after all, just something to outthink. And the Egyptians, they were brilliant at that. Evening is stretching across the city like soft linen now, draping rooftops and palm crowns in dusky purples and smudged gold. You rise from the porch, joints a little creaky, cup in hand, the last of that zir-cooled water trickling down your throat. You stroll toward the outskirts of the house, past storage jars and sleeping dogs until you reach a narrow corridor lined with high walls. The sun can't reach here anymore, but the coolness, it still lingers. And above you, a roof garden. You spot the steps tucked into the far wall, steep and narrow, and climb them slowly. The wind nudges your back like a friend encouraging you forward. By the time you reach the top, you've left the day behind. This rooftop is different from the one you woke on. It's not for sleeping. It's a green retreat, a tangle of pots, plants, shadows and breeze, a garden in the sky. You duck beneath a low trellis, vines wind along the beams overhead, grape, gourd, even flowering papyrus. Their long leaves stretch outward, eager to shade anything they can. Beneath your feet, the packed mud floor is cool where it's been watered, the surface darkened into a kind of rooftop clay carpet. And everywhere around you, plants, in terracotta pots, in woven reed baskets, even in old broken amphorae with their sides patched in plaster. Palm shoots, lotus bulbs, spearmint, henna, basil, small citrus trees with wrinkled green fruits just beginning to swell. This is no accident. The ancient Egyptians didn't just like plants, they planted them with purpose. A rooftop garden wasn't just a pretty idea. It was a survival tool. Plants provide shade, of course, but more importantly, they cool the air through transpiration. As leaves release water vapor, they lower the surrounding temperature. Multiply that by a dozen pots, a few trees, and a handful of damp soil beds, and your rooftop becomes a private oasis, an open-air air conditioner. You sit beneath the gourd vine and lean back against the low parapet wall. The leaves above rustle softly. The breeze moves through them like a sigh. And then, like clockwork, a boy appears with a jar of water and begins the evening watering ritual. Slowly, carefully, he pours a little into each pot, his fingers pressing the earth, checking for softness. He hums as he works. The tune is low, steady, hypnotic. You recognize it. It's the same song you heard from the woman wiping the courtyard walls earlier. Cooling is a rhythm here, a song, a sequence of small, intentional gestures. Water the basil, mist the lemon tree. Sprinkle the gourd leaves so they'll release their breath into the air overnight. You reach for a pot nearby, a wide, shallow one filled with wet pebbles. The water inside has pooled slightly, and when you press your fingers to it, the surface is surprisingly cold. It's not just for decoration. These pebbled pots act like humidity bowls, keeping the air damp enough that heat doesn't feel so aggressive. In some homes, they'd place them under stools or beds. On rooftops, they turn open air into a comfort zone. Historians still puzzle over how elaborate these gardens may have been. Some suggest only the wealthy could afford rooftop oases, while others point to working-class homes with smaller setups, just a few potted vines and herbs, but still incredibly effective. But what's certain is this: Egyptians understood the power of green. They painted gardens in tombs. They decorated temple walls with flowering fig trees and stylized lotus ponds. They placed entire orchards inside palace courtyards. And here, on this rooftop, you understand why. A gentle hush falls across the city. The Nile gleams faintly in the distance, catching the last sunlight like a ribbon of melted gold. You smell mint, wet clay, maybe even jasmine if you stretch your nose far enough into the shadows. The boy finishes his watering. He looks at you for a moment, nods, and vanishes down the stairwell like a leaf caught in a breeze. You lie down on a reed mat, head cushioned on your arm. Above, stars begin to appear, not in full force yet, but a few brave ones blinking gently through the fading blue. The plants above you breathe out the last of their daytime warmth. The rooftop, once baked, now releases a long, cool exhale. and you breathe with it. A rooftop garden isn't luxury, it's logic, soft, leafy, scented logic. And it works. Even now, under the wide Egyptian sky, as the heat lets go and the night reaches down, you feel it. Coolness that grows. You stay on the rooftop for a while, letting the darkness thicken around you like a heavy velvet blanket. The stars are clearer now, bolder. They glint over the Nile, over the city, over the palms that no longer sway, but stand still in the cooling air, listening. Eventually, your legs decide it's time to move again. You slip down the narrow stairs and back into the house, now dimly lit with oil lamps and quiet conversation. The air inside has changed, less hot, less dry. It's easier to breathe. And in the kitchen, something unexpected is happening. There's ice on the table, not a lot. Just a bowl of crushed slush, milky, granular, and clearly melting fast, but still. Ice. In ancient Egypt, you blink, you're not dreaming. A woman scoops a spoonful of the stuff into a shallow cup, adds a drizzle of date syrup, and hands it to a wide-eyed child who squeals and dashes off like he's just been handed the sun's frozen cousin. You take a cautious step forward. How? The answer is surprisingly simple. Ancient Egyptians may not have had electric freezers, but they did have night cooling pits, clever setups that could, under the right conditions, produce ice in the desert. Here's how it worked. Step 1. Dig a shallow, wide basin lined with polished stone or metal and fill it with water. Step 2. Wait for a clear, dry winter night. The kind where the skies are free of cloud cover and the air cools rapidly once the sun sets. Step 3. Place the basin in an open courtyard, surrounded by high walls to block wind but open to the night sky. Above all, make sure the basin is exposed to radiative cooling, a natural process where the heat in the water radiates into the night sky faster than it absorbs surrounding warmth. If the setup is just right, by dawn, a thin sheet of ice forms on top. Not enough to build a snowman, but enough to scrape off, gather, and store in insulated containers, clay jars buried in sand or wrapped in straw. They'd keep the stash for a few days, using it sparingly for medicinal purposes, rituals, or apparently refreshing desserts. Historians still argue whether this method was common or experimental. Some point to papyrus scrolls that mention solid water used in temple rites. Others cite ancient Persian texts where similar night ice systems called yakchals existed that might have influenced Egyptian practices. But here, in this little kitchen, theory becomes reality. You're handed a cup of your own. The woman smiles as you take it, a polite but slightly smug smile as if to say, "Yes, we figured out how to freeze water in the desert. You're welcome." You take a bite. It's not like modern ice cream. There's no dairy, just ice, date syrup, maybe a pinch of crushed mint or fig. But it is undeniably cold and sweet. And for a moment, it startles your mouth into happiness. The child returns for seconds. He's already got brain freeze and he doesn't care. In the corner, a young man carries a tightly wrapped pot filled with the remaining ice to a cellar room, where it'll be used the next morning for treating a grandmother's sore joints. Cooling was always therapeutic here, not just for comfort, but for healing. You walk to the courtyard, the same walls that held wind catchers, that shaded lotus pools, now double as cooling traps. Above, you can just make out a flat basin on the roof, empty now, but waiting for the next perfect night. That's the key with ancient ice. It didn't happen by force. It happened by patience, timing, planning, precision. You think of the workers who stayed up to monitor the basin, the priest who gathered the first sheet of dawn-formed ice with reverent hands, the mother who pressed it gently to her baby's fevered forehead. Cooling here wasn't just for survival. It was a gesture of care, of curiosity, of stubborn ingenuity. You finish your cup slowly, savouring the last spoonful as it turns from slush to sweet water. The breeze dances again, playful, sly, cooler than before. And you smile, because someone thousands of years ago looked up at the desert stars and said, "I bet I can freeze water under that." And they did, The last of the date ice has melted on your tongue, and with it, the house begins to drift into its nighttime rhythm. The clay walls glow faintly from within, their warmth slowly exhaling into the dark. Candles flicker low in their niches, feet pad gently across smooth floors. You follow the soft hum of voices down a corridor, past closed rooms and into a long central hall, a space not built for ceremony or meals or rest, but for something far more basic: air. You're standing in what was once called a hypo-style passage, or in simpler homes, a ventilation hall. Narrow, tall, shaded. The kind of room that didn't call attention to itself until the heat rose. And when the heat came, this room became a lifeline. You feel it instantly. The shift. Not colder, exactly, but moving. Air moves through this space like water. You stand still and it brushes your arms. Take a step forward and it meets you again. The corridor acts like a wind tunnel, drawing cooler air in and pushing warmer air up and out through slotted vents high in the walls. And just like that, the building breathes. This is where the true genius of Egyptian architecture shines, not in the massive monuments or grand halls, but in airflow. You look up, small, triangular, clear-story windows near the roofline let in light during the day and release hot air by night. Some are covered in fine lattice work, others left open to the sky, angled precisely to avoid direct sunlight while inviting breezes in. Now here's the kicker. Some scholars argue that wind tunnels like this were designed not just for comfort, but acoustics, that the sounds of a breeze moving through them created a hum, almost musical, that echoed through the house at night like a lullaby. Maybe that's romanticizing things, but you swear right now you can hear it. A low, tuneless breath, like the building itself is sighing. Content. You press your back to one wall. It's cool, not from water, not from shade, but from flow. Air in, air out. Every room connected by a gentle push and pull system, invisible yet essential. This was intentional. Some homes were built with an entire architectural philosophy called passive cooling in mind, orienting buildings toward prevailing winds, using high ceilings to trap rising heat, and placing internal courtyards exactly where they'd pull wind through the whole structure. And right now, you're in the center of that wind's journey. It starts at the front of the house, moves through a partially shaded garden or pool area, slips between columns, rises through this corridor, and escapes into the night like a satisfied sigh. You walk toward the far end, where another room opens up, a cool room, often used in the hottest weeks. Its walls are thicker, its windows smaller. The floor is packed earth, sometimes lined with stone or palm fronds, even dampened with water in the morning. You step inside. The air here doesn't move fast, it settles, heavy, gentle, still. You can almost feel it nestling into the corners. A cot rests along one wall, above it a reed mat stretched taut to allow air to circulate beneath. A small table sits nearby with a clay jar half submerged in a shallow trough of wet sand, the Egyptian version of a swamp cooler. Someone thought of everything. Even the doors in this space have a function. They're made of layered linen soaked in resin and stretched on wooden frames, not heavy enough to trap heat, but strong enough to hold a breeze. You touch one gently. It bends slightly under your palm, then bounces back. And the light. A narrow slit near the ceiling lets in just enough to see without warming the room. The slit is angled, because of course it is. You lie down on the cot. The breeze finds you again, not constant but patient. Historians still argue whether these airflow systems were used only in the homes of nobles or were common in middle-class houses too. Some say these features were a luxury. Others insist they were too practical not to be widespread. Either way, one thing is certain. These people understood movement. In a world where the sun stayed parked above your head for 10 hours a day, standing still was surrender. Movement was survival. So they moved air. and that movement saved them. You shift slightly. The reed beneath you creaks. Dust motes drift through the last beam of moonlight. Somewhere far off, a door closes gently, and the house continues to breathe, with you in it. The quiet of the cool room becomes your whole world for a while. Time slows. The movement of the air becomes a lullaby, and even the shadows seem to stretch more gently across the walls. You drift. Not quite asleep, not quite awake, just hovering in that peaceful limbo. But something rustles, not loud, just enough to stir your attention. You open your eyes to find that the moonlight has deepened. The hallway beyond is silvered, the air cooler still, and someone is lighting a small brazier, not for heat, but for scent. A priest, or perhaps a servant trained in temple ways, moves with quiet grace. In his hands a tray of dried herbs, bark, and soft resin beads that catch the fire and release their soul into the room. You inhale. The scent is rich, kifi, the sacred Egyptian incense. Sweet, spicy, soothing. A blend of frankincense, myrrh, honey, wine-soaked raisins, juniper, cinnamon, and mint, all ground and pressed into pellets. But this isn't just about mood, it's part of the nighttime cooling ritual. Because in ancient Egypt, it wasn't just about cooling the skin, it was about calming the mind. And the Egyptians understood something we're only just relearning. When the mind relaxes, the body feels cooler. Scent played a huge part in that. The brazier's smoke curls upward and dances along the ceiling beams, pushed softly by the same air currents that glide through the home. The scent seeps into the clay walls, into the cloth of your linen tunic, into your lungs, and suddenly the day's heat doesn't just feel distant, it feels gone. You sit up, slowly. The priest meets your gaze for a moment, nods once, and then continues his quiet work, placing small bowls of scented oil on the floor near the breeze channels. Oil warming gently by airflow? That's right. The Egyptians didn't have diffusers or essential oil burners, but they did understand thermal aroma release. A little warmed clay, a little fragrant oil, and the breeze carries the perfume. Not overpowering, just enough to convince your senses that the air around you is softer, lighter, cooler, and you believe it. In temple records, kifi was said to drive away illness and invite the gods into dreams. It was burned at dusk and again before dawn, not just religiously, but practically. Mosquitoes hated it. Bonus points. But kaifi wasn't the only tool in their night cooling kit. Some Egyptians used aromatic pillows, linen cases filled with dried flowers, herbs, and cooling minerals, lavender, mint, blue lotus. One recipe even included ground seashells and traces of natron to absorb moisture from the neck and scalp while you slept. You lean back again, head against the wall, and wonder what that must have felt like. The weight of a pillow that smelled like the Nile at spring, like temple gardens in bloom. A pillow that whispered, "You've made it through the day. Now rest." Across the room, another servant gently opens a reed fan, wide, leaf-shaped, and mounted on a long handle. She doesn't wave it quickly, just a slow, steady pulse, once, twice, 3 times. A fan made not to push air, but to coax it. You close your eyes. In the temples of Thebes, fans were said to accompany high priests during evening rituals, not just for pomp, but to stir the perfumed air and keep the priest awake and alert during long chants. But in homes like this, fans meant family. Someone sitting beside you. Someone watching your comfort. The Egyptians knew that coolness wasn't just a temperature. It was a gesture. A mother soaking your feet in a clay basin. A servant wiping your brow with a mint-soaked cloth. A priest lighting kifi, not because the gods demanded it, but because you needed it. You let the air do its work. The scent, the breeze, the low flicker of firelight on clay walls. There is no effort here, no machinery, just attention, just care. Historians still puzzle over how much of this was ritual, how much daily life. But in truth, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. The night deepens, the air cools further, and all around you the house is transforming into a temple of rest. A temple not of stone and prayer, but of sleep. And sleep in Egypt was sacred. You lie down again, this time on a pallet pulled closer to the center of the room. The reed mat has been replaced with a soft linen sheet, cooled by breeze and shadow. Your head rests on a pillow that smells faintly of lotus. And the final thing you hear before you drift off? The faintest echo of a reed fan. 1, 2, 3. The night deepens into a thick, velvet silence, interrupted only by the low flutter of linen curtains and the soft creak of palm wood in the rafters. The air has cooled significantly now, the heat of the day fully exhaled from the bones of the house. You lie in stillness, body relaxed, breath slow, cocooned in shadow and drifting scent. But not everyone is asleep. There is movement, subtle and deliberate, in the inner courtyard. You sit up, stretching slowly, and follow the flickering oil light. A pair of servants are gently arranging sleeping mats along the smooth stone floor. Some are woven from reed and softened by layers of linen. Others are simple cotton sheets, dampened slightly before being laid out. This too is a kind of cooling technology, the sleep setup ritual. Egyptians didn't simply collapse onto the nearest surface. No, they prepared carefully. You step quietly to the edge of the courtyard. The stars are bright overhead, and the breeze snakes between the columns, drawn through the open layout by centuries of smart architecture. One servant sprinkles a faint trail of rosewater along the perimeter of the mats, each drop releasing a cool scent as it hits the warm stone. A form of passive aromatherapy, yes, but also a practical move. The scent repels insects, the dampness subtly cools the surrounding air. Then comes the linen canopy. Stretched on a simple wooden frame, it's thin enough to allow air movement but dense enough to block moonlight and dust. Draped like a delicate sail over the sleeping area, it gently undulates in the breeze, like the river itself. You lie back once more, this time on a mat beneath the canopy, and feel the transformation. What was a dry courtyard just hours ago is now a cooling chamber, thoughtfully staged, every item placed with purpose. Every material selected for texture, breathability, scent. A servant passes with a cooling stone, a small, polished block of alabaster wrapped in damp cloth and left beside the pillow. You lift it, press it gently against your wrist, then your forehead. The sensation is tender and calming, like pressing against the memory of cold rather than the real thing. And then something curious. A small, shallow clay saucer is placed at your feet. No oil, no incense, just water. The idea? As you sleep, the air will evaporate a bit from the dish, creating a slight pocket of moisture around your feet, a microclimate of cool, a tiny, invisible blessing to help ease you through the hottest part of the night, just before dawn. Historians still debate whether these techniques were learned from observing desert animals or developed through generations of homegrown genius. Some argue that wealth dictated comfort. Others insist these nighttime rituals were practiced by all classes, just with different materials and degrees of flourish. But here's what can't be debated. They worked. You pull the edge of a linen sheet over yourself, and even that feels deliberate. The fabric is light, faintly scented, crisp from drying in shaded breezes earlier in the day. Overhead, a servant extinguishes one lamp, then another, until only the softest glow remains. A clay lantern with a lid designed to direct the flame downward and reduce heat radiating into the space. And just before sleep finally claims you, a whisper of motion returns. The reed fan. This time, it's not held by a person, it's suspended. A simple mechanical fan made of papyrus leaves, hanging on a cord attached to a weight. As the breeze pushes gently on one side, the fan rocks, then resets, then rocks again. Not constant, just enough to remind the body, you're safe now, you're not in the sun anymore, you're not in the noise, you're here, under stars and linen, within walls that have spent the whole day learning how to cool you by night. The final thing you feel as your thoughts begin to dissolve is the rhythm of the house itself. Breathe in, scent of rose and stone. Breathe out, coolness from clay and shadow. Breathe in the hush of water at your feet. Breathe out the weight of the heat finally gone. The Egyptians didn't fight the sun. They outweighted it, outthought it, outrested it, and now, so do you. The night, now fully surrendered to silence, has wrapped itself around you like a linen cocoon, and for a while, nothing moves. Not you, not the air, not even your thoughts. The coolness that took all day to build now holds everything still. But hours pass, as they do, and just before dawn, a quiet stir ripples through the house again. It begins with a soft drip. Not rain. There's no such thing here in the middle of the season. No, this is collected condensation, tiny beads of moisture that have formed on the cool clay of the water jars, the walls, the shaded stones. The contrast between night air and daytime heat leaves behind a gift, dew. Invisible, barely there dew. You sit up, slowly. Even before the sun returns, the city begins its gentle pre-dawn rituals. And one of them? Harvesting coolness before it vanishes. In the far corner of the courtyard, a woman moves from pot to pot with a clean cloth. She wipes down the exteriors of jars and basins, collecting the moisture into the fabric, which she then wrings into a shallow bowl. Yes, they saved it. Every drop. That water, cool from the night and scented with minerals, will be used to wash faces, refresh flowers, and in wealthier homes, anoint statues in early morning prayers. You rise and join the quiet movement of servants preparing for sunrise. One man dips a bundle of palm fronds into that gathered moisture and begins wiping the stone floor, not to clean it, but to hold the coolness a little longer. Others lay down dampened reed mats along the eastern wall, knowing the sun will hit there first. The goal? To delay its bite. Every surface you can cool now is one less that will radiate heat later. And then, perhaps most beautifully, someone opens a cooling cabinet. It's not what you expect. It's a square niche built into the thickest wall of the house, lined with glazed tiles and painted with images of the Nile, lotuses, ibis birds, cool blue ripples. Its side, a stone shelf, shaded from all angles, with 2 clay jars resting quietly. You step closer. The jars are full, one with water, the other with milk, and both are cool to the touch. This was the refrigerator before refrigerators. Not magic, just brilliant physics. The thick shaded wall acts as insulation. The paint, often in cooler tones, not just decorative, but psychological. Blue hues that convinced the eye the contents were colder. A kind of visual cooling. Even the placement of these cabinets mattered. Always on the northern wall, away from direct sunlight, often below eye level to capitalize on the denser, cooler air that settles near the ground. You pour yourself a small sip from the water jar. It's crisp, shockingly so, considering there's no ice, no freezer, no machinery humming in the background, just stone, shade, and time. And patience, always patience. Historians debate the origins of these cooling cabinets. Were they influenced by trade with northern cities, borrowed from Persian ice cellars, or were they an indigenous innovation born of 1,000 years of studying the sun's cruelty? The answer most likely is yes, to all of it. Egypt was never isolated. It observed, it borrowed, and then it perfected. You hear a soft sound now, metal against clay. A servant is setting breakfast on a shaded terrace. Figs, barley cakes, lentils, and a bowl of chilled melon sliced just before dawn. You're told the melon was stored overnight beneath damp straw in a shaded pit. No miracle, just intention. You sit down and take a piece. It's not icy, not cold, but not hot either. And in this desert, that's enough to make it taste like paradise. As you eat, the first light of the sun creeps over the horizon. But now you're ready. The house is prepped. Water is stored. Walls are still cool from the night's slow breathing. And the knowledge of how to keep cool, that sacred, ancient wisdom, is already working its silent magic. You lean back, melon juice sweet on your tongue, the coolness of the clay beneath your fingers. The day ahead may sizzle, but for now, in this single sliver of morning, you're winning. The sun finally breaches the horizon, its light amber and forgiving, for now. You rise from the breakfast terrace, wiping melon juice from your fingers, and step barefoot into the courtyard once more. The ground beneath your feet is still cool from the night's efforts. That won't last, but in this fleeting hour, it feels like a victory. You notice something new, pots hanging from a wooden frame, suspended by cords, turning slowly in the breeze like sleepy planets. At first glance, they seem decorative, but as you walk closer, you realize there's something else entirely. These are hanging coolers, an early version of the evaporative Zia pot system still used in remote places today. But the Egyptians had their own spin, 2 clay pots, one nestled inside the other, the space between them filled with wet sand. The inner pot holds food or drink. The outer one is porous, allowing moisture to seep through and evaporate in the open air. The evaporation draws heat out of the inner pot, keeping its contents cool, sometimes by as much as 10 degrees, not a refrigerator, but a defiant little miracle suspended by ropes and shade. You reach out to touch the surface of one. It's slightly damp, rough, cool to your fingers. A servant gently lowers one for inspection. Inside, goat cheese wrapped in fig leaves, soft, perfectly edible, protected from spoilage by nothing but clay and cleverness. Next to it, a jar of brewed hibiscus tea, still fresh. The red petals, swimming in the cool liquid, catch the morning light like little rubies. The Egyptians didn't rely on magic. They made science feel like magic. You watch as another servant gently rocks the hanging frame, helping the pots turn so that each side gets equal breeze. A full-on rotational cooling method, with no moving parts, no fuel, no sound, just rhythm and reason. From above, a voice calls. You turn to see a young woman on the rooftop, untying the shade sails that were drawn tight overnight. Long strips of linen and palm fiber slowly begin to roll down, reattaching themselves to wall hooks and overhangs. These weren't for decoration either. They're sun filters, blocking direct heat while letting light and airflow through. Like giant sunglasses for the house, their color is light, a pale tan, nearly white, chosen to reflect, not absorb. The material? Loosely woven, like gauze, enough to mute the heat, not trap it. The courtyard dims, not into darkness, but into comfort. You step back inside and a child hands you a hand fan, freshly dipped in water and rose oil. You wave it once across your face and smile. It's indulgent, pointless against the full blaze of noon, but right now, it's heaven. Historians still argue whether these practices were learned from older African tribes or from Mesopotamian experiments. Some claim they emerged independently, nurtured by necessity and observation. What no one argues is the result. They worked. Egyptian homes, even those without wealth, were designed to adapt, not fight. To flow, not resist. Walls thick enough to insulate. Roofs shaped to vent. Water saved and redirected. Materials chosen not for status, but for how they breathed. And if you paid attention, if you listened to the walls and watched the shadows, you could stay cool, even as the desert roared outside. You notice now that the interior walls have been freshly whitewashed, their surface matte and chalky. Not just for beauty. White reflects heat. A fresh layer every few months could drop a room's temperature slightly, but noticeably. The Egyptians knew what modern engineers forget. Small changes accumulate: white walls, clay jars, shade sails, moisture bowls, linen bedding, cooling pits, plant cover, passive airflow, scented oil, stone flooring, directional windows, rotating shade. Together they created a kind of harmony, an architectural quiet. You stand in the center of the room again, the early light now filtered through layers of cloth and greenery and cooled air. You listen. No fans, no motors. Just the sound of a house that knows what to do. And you think, maybe this wasn't just about cooling. Maybe this was about respect for the sun, for the land, for the body, for the rhythm of the day and the art of patience. The Egyptians didn't run from the heat. They understood it. And from that understanding came shade, came rest, came peace. The sun is fully awake now, not in its cruelest state just yet, but its fingers have begun to stretch across rooftops and over garden walls. The shade is shrinking inch by inch, retreating like low tide before the heat crashes in. And yet you are calm. You've seen behind the curtain. You know the tricks now. You're not just surviving the heat, you're coexisting with it, the way the Egyptians always intended. You walk through the house one last time, barefoot, deliberate, taking in every small intentional detail with new eyes. The lotus pool in the corner, still cool, still exhaling sweet humidity. The jar of mint cloths, dampened and rolled, waiting for a warm forehead. The reed mats, placed just so, angled to catch the airflow, moving through the archways. You lean against a wall that once burned your shoulder by midday. But now, it's not hot. Not yet. Because it was watered earlier, because the lime plaster that coats it was refreshed last week, because someone knew exactly how the sun would move today, and that someone might have been a servant, or a grandmother, or a child, because cooling in ancient Egypt wasn't left to architects alone. It was a domestic art, passed down in gesture and routine, a quiet choreography of pots and cloths and light. You step back into the courtyard, now fully shaded under the linen sails. The breeze hasn't stopped. It pulses gently, pulled by corridors and shaded walkways that were carved not for beauty, but for breath. It smells of rosewater and baked bread. Someone is already at the hearth, preparing the noon meal. And even here, beside a fire, there are cooling tricks in place. A bowl of water beneath the cooking bench, a clay partition smeared with wet mud to keep the air moist. A shaded shelf nearby holding cool dishes ready to soothe the tongue. You sit again where you started, in the center of the courtyard, now surrounded by every clever tool the ancients had to offer. And you remember the wind catcher, the lotus pond, the sun clocks and slatted walls, the wet cloths, the plant-sheltered roofs, the sweat-wicking linen, the scent of kai-fi wafting up through the corridor, the water jars that shivered with condensation in the night air, the fan swinging slowly above your head like a palm leaf nodding off to sleep. And somehow, together, all of these have shaped a home that doesn't fight the heat. It flows with it, it knows it, it outsmarts it. And so do you now. You exhale, cool and slow. A breeze catches your breath and carries it off, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels like the house is breathing with you. A low sound hums in the columns. A palm frond taps lightly against the canopy overhead. Somewhere nearby, a jar drips quietly into its basin. Even the sun seems to pause, held back not by force but by design. And in that pause, between day and blaze, between heat and shade, you find a stillness you hadn't known you were seeking. The Egyptians never built air conditioning units, but they built rhythms, and you've been folded into one. You rise at last, not to escape the heat, but to move with it. The day will grow louder, brighter, harsher. That's its way. But you'll walk through it cooled by knowledge, by the ancient, beautiful strategies of those who understood that staying cool wasn't about control. It was about wisdom. It was about respect. And it was always about timing. You smile and step into the light. Now, as we gently close the curtain on our ancient Egyptian day, let's allow all that heat, all that sun, and all that clever architecture to dissolve into the background. Take a long, soft breath. Let your shoulders ease downward. Let your fingers rest. There's no more breeze to chase, no more pots to wipe. You've done enough. Feel the house still around you, the thick walls holding their calm, the lotus-scented air weaving through corridors like a river in no hurry. The linen sheets are cool beneath you, your head cradled by the softest pillow imaginable, perhaps even filled with dried mint and lotus petals. Listen just for a moment to the rhythm of the ancient world as it finally quiets. The breeze rustles the canopy above you, not urgently, but like a mother brushing a child's hair. Even the Nile seems to hush, slipping past in moonlight just beyond your reach. Everything is soft now. Every movement, every sound, every breath has slowed. You are safe. You are cool. You are part of something very old and very wise. There is no rush here. The heat will wait. The sun will return. But for now, in this breath, in this softness, you are beyond its reach. You are where you need to be. Let the quiet carry you. Let the shade hold you. Let the story sleep. Sweet dreams.